It is 7 p.m. It's a Friday, and I'm Sneaky Devil, which means this is Fanfiction Contempt Theater. Hello, Internet. Atin and Max will not be joining us today, so instead we have a guest star, Zexes, or however the hell you pronounce his name.
It was an accurate approximation.
Alright, good. As always, I've dropped the links to the fic we're currently reading in the Discord found down below, either in the panels or in the, description if you're on YouTube. Now, you might be hearing a bit of feedback from Zexes, and that's because he doesn't have a headset for some reason.
No, I do have a headset, but it's open, so maybe it's picking up the bleed from the open headphones.
It's possible. Or maybe you just have your volume obnoxiously loud. Either way, we're going to get right on into it with a Ruby Titanfall crossover. I know you're all probably sick of Ruby by now, so am I, but unfortunately it seems like Ruby is the only one outputting good fics to laugh at right now. Which is unfortunate. Alright.
Well, we haven't seen Titanfall yet, so...
Oh yeah, no, Titanfall is the new part, which is why I picked it up in the first place, because I was like, holy shit, something we haven't seen before. Anyway, so this is Without a Consciousness by Descent of Darkness 60606.
I see 2 extra zeros here, really.
Indeed. First story after skulking about. Rated M for my paranoia consciousness. Okay. Is it... Oh, okay. Apparently there needs to be a punctuation between paranoia and consciousness because that's apparently a new statement. So, consciousness, colon, is the state or quality of awareness of oneself. How can one truly surpass their own unknowing, self-imposed blocks? Simple. Force change upon it. It is a savage yet efficient way to create monsters to fight monsters. It is a double-edged blade if wielded properly and held on a tight leash. They're trying to be flowery as shit, and I have no fucking idea what they're trying to say there. You have any idea?
Same. Absolutely no idea.
Like, I get the kind of idea of what they're going with, but...
From the moment they forgot to include that dot between paranoia and consciousness, it was all pretty shaky.
Part, ignoring that part, though, like... They're trying to be flowery as hell with their summary, and
you see, I can't consciously ignore it because that's where the train wreck started.
Oh, I know that's where the train wreck started. It becomes from a long line of... Well, we're on episode 92 right now, so that means we're almost around 200 hours of doing this. Well, I am, because apparently Max and Atin flake out from time to time for reasons. Yeah, it's one of those people trying to be smart and deep. Indeed. I'm gonna need to be more drunk for this one. Alright, let's get into it. I do not own anything, not Ruby, not Titanfall, or any affiliated tag tar owned by Rooster Teeth or Respawn Entertainment. Hell, I don't even own my own soul. Ha 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 ha! Space is vast, holds all kinds of possibilities. The Fermi Paradox. Alien life does not exist. At first, true, no signs of alien life ever found when man's reach extended to the stars, which meant its greed could go about unhindered.
What? It looks like this thing isn't going to be any more sensical than the summary is.
It appears the summary, in true fashion, has set the tone for how the rest of the story is going. And that tone is completely nonsensical. Alright, so, to those who are unaware, the Fermi Paradox is not alien life doesn't exist. It's the likelihood of alien life. basically, how likely is it there to be a planet that can sustain life? And that narrows the planet range down. And then on those planet ranges, what's the percentage chance of life attaining cluster level of abilities, such as lizards and whatnot, and fish? That's even shorter. What's the chance of it becoming sentient? That's even smaller. What's the chance of it actually lasting to the space age? That's even smaller. What's the chance of those civilizations exiting their solar system? That's even smaller. And basically it goes on and on and on as it narrows the scope further and further of the likelihood of aliens both not destroying themselves and becoming advanced enough to actually contact other potential species that have also made it out of their solar system. And it gets to a ridiculous degree of low likelihood of percentages. And so it's not that alien life doesn't exist, it's just the likelihood of alien life being capable of, you know, X level of technology is low.
To be honest, I call it bull. Complete and utter bullshit. Because
what, aliens
how many
or
stars do we have? I think the paradox is that there is so much stars that this should have worked at least once.
The problem with the paradox, the problem with the paradox is that it often has been pointed out is that we're basing off of sustainable life off of the idea that life needs to exist in the way it does on Earth. And so if life somehow formed that lives off of methane instead of oxygen, then that opens up a whole new range of planets. And point being, we're stupid and we like to sound profound. In the frontier, practically anything can happen in a way, meaning Murphy's Law is in constant effect. Again, with this deep bullshit. Especially when it comes to pilot and Titan duos. Pilots are agile, merciless, and deadly. Titans are slow, steadfast, and intimidating. These are the main contenders of the war between the IMC, a mining company tasked with collecting resources and maintaining order, and the Frontier Militia, a ragtag band of colonists fighting against the IMC's exploitation of the frontier at any cost. Which, I never quite got the plot of that, because it's like, okay, on one side you have the company that gathers up all the minerals to make Titans, and on the other side you have a bunch of guerrilla fighters who have a limited number of Titans, a limited number of pilots, and a limited number of soldiers.
Oh, but they have unlimited amount of plot armor.
Basically. Also, there's only so much resources for them because they're gonna either have to mine themselves or, you know, steal resources from the IMC. So if their Titans get damaged, it becomes a slowly entropic position of trying to repair them, and using more Titans to get more resources to repair more Titans. That is if they don't get destroyed outright. So, and anyway, yeah, plot armor is basically protecting the ragtag colonists. Among this conflict, everyone must pick a side or be killed when the fighting reaches their home. Again, I'm not really, you know, too aware on the actual air quote plot of Titanfall, but I'm pretty sure they just didn't, both sides didn't just indiscriminately kill people. It will always hit at home for the fighters, be they grunts or commanders. Again, with more philosophical bullshit. Planet Ozuno 5 was one-of-a-kind world. Some may call it a Gaia world. This world is lush and vibrant, with a wide array of life, all of them docile, of course. Impossible.
Of course.
This world has numerous resources ready for the harvest. Its beauty forced the IMC to use other means to harvest the resources needed, preserving the ecology for once. Why? Who knows or cares? Again, the lack of punctuation is killing.
Basically, it's not the lack of punctuation, it's the fact that the author basically said, I don't care.
For some reason, the incredibly corrupt corporation who is so oppressive and militia formed to fight against them decided not to be corrupt or oppressive for once at this lush world for whatever reason. Okay. Like, alright, I guess. It's home to roughly 1.2 million people with several IMC garrisons housing 500,000 soldiers each. When do we get to the Ruby parts? Like, honestly, oh, lovely, it's freaking lots of freaking, Titanfall, lovely. I'm not here for the Titanfall, though. I'm here for the whole Ruby part of Titanfall. That's what I really want to see.
There is also a problem with numbers, if you haven't noticed. It has 1.2 million people and several garrisons housing 500,000 each. You can't have 1-2 million people with 500,000 in several garrisons.
I mean, you're gonna need more than several garrisons. Wait.
First of all, it's 500,000 garrison. That's already BS.
Wait. Wait, several garrisons refer to more than 2.
Yep.
I guess they're saying the population of non-soldiers is 1.2. That's a lot of freaking soldiers. Holy shit! Wow. Also, that's a lot of food you're gonna have to cart in. It was home to a variety of people from all walks of life, near the base of the mountain where its lush, vibrant grass plain sat a 2-story house, fence covering a 50-acre plot. Holy shit. 50 acres? Holy hell! Okay. Farmland covering 40% of this land. It's freaking better, Jesus. Even a barn, odd in the corner, nestled by several silos. While real, it's near. What? Near a local town home to the planet's no possessive form, so that's just multiple planets, biological development lab called Cyranic Solutions.
You know, Sneaky, with all the trash I'm sitting through in my app, I've never once came upon anything quite like that.
I just gotta tell you, dude, I am just that skilled at finding absolute garbage. I mean, at the house holds a family doomed to a life of misery. But not yet, at least. Not for the oldest son. What? What is this plot so far? What the hell is this name?
It kind of feels like half of this plot, or even 75%, is in the author head, and she just, I think it's a she.
The author
she just decides to feed us bits and chunks.
Smashed. That's what happens. The author got absolutely smashed, like I'm currently attempting to do, and proceeded to write this fic. Okay, 1, 2, 3, down the hatch. Whoa!
So you decided to get as drunk as the author was when writing this, right?
I have decided the only possible way of reading this story coherently is to read it as the author wrote it, which is clearly severely drunk. Alex Xavier Barnett, eldest son to the Barnett family. His father's name was Eberhard Barnett, a discharged Black Ops operative after a battle gone wrong took his legs, and being discharged due to it developed a strong hatred. What? The father's apparently an it. Developed a strong hatred for war with how he was discharged. Wait, he was discharged for how he was discharged?
Wrong.
What? Apparently he went into the future and hated war so much he was discharged in the past for his future opinions.
No, you don't understand. He lost his legs and then settled with his sister, apparently, because she has his family name.
Apparently. Settled down with a girl by the name of Celine Burnett. Wait. Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
He married in the family, apparently. Oh, we have, hello, Isley. I'll regret I'm asking, but what fanfic are we covering tonight? Well, we are covering a Ruby Titanfall fanfic, which so far has proved to be both painful and abusive towards my brain and my liver. How they met is rather strange, considering Celine was a researcher with all kinds of degrees in biology. Really? All kinds of degrees. Interesting. I'm not going to specify what kind of degrees, because you as the author probably don't know shit about biology, and therefore couldn't specify what kind of degrees Celine has, because you didn't even take the 2 seconds to look up what kind of degrees exist for biology. Which, if you had, you would understand why most people only have 1 degree in biology. Biology is hard. I would know. I had a minor in biology. There is a lot of kinds of biology. Getting a degree in all of them is quite difficult. After colliding and scattering the notes she planned on reviewing, sighing as she went to pick them up, grumbling about males and their lack of eyesight. Oh boy, it's a feminist. Noticed an armored hand helping her. Looking up, she saw his face smiling and apologizing. Celine sighed, but surprisingly found it adorable how she came to the conclusion when just meeting him will forever be beyond her.
I've already given up on understanding anything in the sequel.
What? Hell, even for him, he found her to be a goddess. Not long after that, they began spending their free time together. They say opposites attract, and in this case, true. Eberhard was a cocky, impulsive, loose cannon cop with nothing to lose. Oh, sorry, that's not what it says. Oh no, that's basically what it says. While Celine was a modest, cautious, but emotions held to the heart more. Others see the relations hip falling. What? Others see the relations hip falling. But others see it as a good balance for each other.
Let me Google the image that really should go with this fic. I will drop it into your private or something so that you could display it on screen. because I think that's the definition of this fic.
Oh. Ah, yes. That is a good description of this fic. Yes. Confusion and alcohol. That is an accurate description of this fic, yes. Anyway, bruh, it's my uncle's birthday. Goddamn, why the hell is everyone goddamn useless? Not long after that, they began. It was after his discharge did they decide to leave the military. After! As in way after, apparently. One of them being forced on good terms, the other following to help him cope with his new prosthetics she helped make specifically for him and to be his rock. The new world called Zuno called to them. They were given a 50-acre plot, 50,000 credits, and told to go hog wild. Who the hell told them to do that? Eberhard wanted to give to society, not take from it, so it's notting his 2 black op assassination jobs the military tasked him with. What? Celine wanted to just be there for him, to help him any way she can. In fact, she helped fund Cybernetic Solutions in a way to help deal with xeno diseases by creating a virus capable of mutating the host in small ways to help repel the foreign invaders she called the Cruentus. Yet the user still retains humanity. Oh boy, retroviruses. I don't see anything going wrong with this. In fact, that's not the plot to every movie ever dealing with sci-fi.
You know, they did tell him to go hog wild, so I think that qualifies.
That is true. So the farm is doing wonders, especially with the only 2 beings he would go to war for. His son and daughter. Wow, you won't even go for... Wow. Won't even go to war for his wife, only his kids. That asshole. His son and daughter, named Alex Xavier and Melody, they stood by each other ever since Melody was born. Alex stood by her, protecting her from any hope to harm her, and doing a better job than the grizzled veteran dad. Their father snorted when he heard his nickname as Black Knight. He saw the knight, but black part was when he gave a boy a black eye for accidentally pushing Melody into a puddle when she was 5. Wait, he fucking punched a kid in the eye? Oh. Oh, no,
see,
Alex Xavier punched a kid in the eye.
You see, I already have a problem with this fic, and that isn't that it's nonsensical.
Oh,
I think that in like 3 or 4 pages is where we're going to see the last of this Eberhard guy, because for certain it's Alex that's going to get into Ruby. So this whole backstory is unnecessary.
More or less. Honestly, I really don't care about Titanfall, and I can't say anyone else does either. Because honestly, who the hell cares about Titanfall plot? I'm pretty sure anyone clicking on this story is clicking for the Ruby aspect, which so far we have not seen. And so, we continue. Alex, who was 7, went berserk and gave the kid a black eye. Eberhard what?
Sneaky. You know what?
What?
I just did a search on this page, and there is no mention of this whole chapter.
Of Ruby? Well, we're almost at 30 minutes. We're gonna say screw the story and we're gonna move on. Yeah, because if there's no mention of Ruby, there's no real point in staying here beyond mocking this story further. Because this is fanfiction contempt theater, where we mock things, and I tell you not to go along and mock them as well in person, because that would be bad, and I would get in trouble and all that fun stuff.
Wait, what? What?
What?
What?
What?
I'm just going through the chapters.
Right.
And the first mention of Ruby is chapter 5.
It takes
So
5 chapters to even get to frickin' Ruby, really?
Yep.
Jesus Christ!
I mean, it's not technically a bad thing, it's just...
Well, no, the
really,
problem here is you gotta...
Who the fuck cares for Titanfall enough to wait through 4 chapters of this?
Yeah, no one really cares about Titanfall plot enough to wait through 4 friggin' chapters of it. Now, 1 or 2 I might see your point. Be like, okay, you're setting it all up to everything to get into Ruby, fine. But 4 chapters, like... I'm not even an 1/8 in, no, I would say more like a 1/6 maybe into the story, and I'm already like 12 fingers into my vodka.
I think you are miscounting.
Oh yes, Isley. Atin is not here, Max is not here, Nose Hair is not here. I am joined here today by Zixid, a Twitch and Discord member who volunteered himself to be on stream for the world to see. More or less because I'm basically completely incompetent when I'm alone. And so he is providing an able-bodied sounding board for me to exaggerate off. How many fingers of vodka are left? 6.
Oh, so you can't get much more drunk than this.
Well, I mean, it's a 2-liter bottle of vodka. So 6 fingers is a significant number of vodka. I was counting fingers on the shot glass. Anyway, we're at like basically 30 minutes now, so I'm just gonna say screw this shite and move on. Because I do not care, Dad. Alex screams, slamming his hands down on the table. Is where I draw the line.
You know, there is one particular interesting comment for this story that I'd like to read.
Alright, go ahead.
This one got me really interested. Despite few of the grammar errors and typos you mentioned on the author notes, still very interesting story. If you don't have and want a better reader to fix the typos and some grammar mistakes, let me know. I'd be happy to help. Despite even if I am not native English speaker, not even as a second language.
I hate to say that this reviewer actually has better grammar than the frickin' author, who, if I tab back, is probably gonna list themselves as English? No, they don't list a country. Alright. Well, that's unfortunate. Because I wanted to mock them for their inability. But I can't. Alright.
I think that, given from the amount of stuff on their author info page, their language is English.
Alright, so, the next story we're gonna cover is Rise of the Dark King. A Naruto high school D times D story. Now,
Drama. Oh god.
I am going to preemptively put the edgelord tag on this. Because Rise of the Dark King, Naruto, and D times D. Alright. Rise of the Dark King. He had lost everything. His friends and family. Then she came and saved him. But now there is someone else who has her attention and tossed him aside. Will his darkness consume him? Non-elemental nations, Naruto, not a bash story, just drama, harem.
Just drama and harem. Okay.
This is an idea from the Dark King Marcel. Remember, this is fanfic, so Naruto doesn't have to be in character at all, because he isn't. Which is where you're wrong. Fanfiction is primarily for authors to write about the world they're fans of. Which doesn't make much sense if you start off in a world where nothing is similar to the world you're a fan of. You understand my point, right? I'm not making nonsense points, right?
Right.
You make fan fiction for the world you're a fan of. If you completely change the world that you're a fan of to the point where every character is completely out of character, then what the hell is the point of the fan fiction? You're not writing fan fiction anymore. You're basically stealing the characters of the fandoms that you are a part of to write an original story, which is likely shite.
To be honest, I have no idea is a non-canon Naruto actually even is Naruto.
It's not. It is like my favorite comment to call these things. They're meat puppets. They're basically, the author takes the character they like the most, rips out everything that makes the character that character, shoves their hand way up their ass and puppets them around like a goddamn meat puppet. Because who needs original characters when you can just rip everything out of a character people already know and call it OOC? Or a...
You know, I just had a weirdest idea.
Oh?
So, you get this bunch of people, they all write about... You mash a bunch of characters from an anime together, and every one of these people write a non-canon OC, and then it's just a freaking puppet theater with every character just having a hand stretching from his arse.
Basically, yeah. And the reason why I specifically call them meat puppets is because it's not just like the character acts out of character. It's more than that usually. Usually the character is acting basically like a self-insert original character of the author. But the author's like, well, no one wants to read self-insert original characters, which is typically true in most sections of fandom. There's few exceptions like Skyrim and Dark Souls and whatnot, and basically fandoms where the main character is usually originally created. That's where people don't care if it's an OC. But if it's say Naruto in high school D times D, most people will skip over a story that goes, oh yeah, we're basically going to ignore Naruto.
You know, there is an interesting thing about these types of stories and different fandoms.
Oh, what's that?
Because the way Russian fandom sidesteps the suspension of disbelief here is they do not write OCs, basically. They write inserts into Naruto, so it's still the same person in the same canon, but
yeah.
I mean, it's still the same character, it's just a different person wearing that character with the same starting conditions.
Yeah, it's called self-insert OC because it technically is an original character, but the reason why it's called self-insert is because that original character is basically based on the author writing it.
I do not quite agree. This fic is quite different because this Naruto is non-canon. He doesn't have a backstage, he doesn't have props, and he doesn't have the people that make him who he is.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the point.
This is one step worse than self-insert.
Right. No, I see your point, and I do agree with you on a certain level. He sounds like V. Has V stolen your stream? Apparently you sound like V. I know who V is. He's a Romanian. And that's pretty funny. I wish I could get V in here. That'd actually be great. Getting V into this stream. Mocking the disabled is generally frowned upon. This is all stuff that Isley is saying from the YouTube chat. I suppose you could do a Horus Heresy Fate Zero story. Speaking of Naruto D times D, as your long-lost love, Fairy Tail Dragon Slayer come up with any more masterpieces? Now, I will admit, I will check on that next for you, because I am always interested in what new kinds of blows Fairy Tail Dragon Slayer will sing to. Anyway, back on topic and back to the story. Self-insert OCs are trash. Let's move right on into this story. Darkness surrounded him. Nothing was visible to him. He couldn't see anything besides himself and the vast blackness that he was in. You can't trust them, a dark, ominous voice spoke. They are creatures born of sin. They only do what benefits them. The darkness will let you see that. Give in to the darkness. Let it consume you. He shot straight up in bed, panting and sweating. He could feel his heart pounding like it was going to shoot out of his chest. It took him a minute before he relaxed. That dream again. Well, no use worrying about it now. He got out of bed and stretched. He scratched his cheek and made his way to his bathroom. He turned on the sink and washed his face in cold, refreshing water. He dried his face and looked at himself in the mirror. His scraggly blonde hair that went in every direction, his deep blue cerulean eyes. Hey, we're in YA territory now, boys.
It could have been worse. It could have been.
It could have been what?
Orbs.
Oh, that's true. They could have said orbs. That is true. Alright, where is I? That looked joyful, but when angered, cold stare at your very soul. His eyes landed on his cheeks, which had his whiskers. Every time he saw them, they reminded him of that night. He shook his head. Around his neck he wore a necklace with a green gem. He was shirtless and his body was defined as much as a 16-year-old could be. Not a muscle freak, but had great, thorough definition. His most eye-catching thing was the black leather wings coming from his back as he flexed sexily into the mirror. If you haven't picked up yet, the author is female.
I'm surprised this fic doesn't have a romance tag. Drama slash romance.
It's just
Because
drama.
I'm sure.
It's all drama. Only drama. Is he in a bank or a courthouse? Mark another one down for the cerulean eyes counter. It's kind of sad we need to have one of those. Honestly, I really honestly should just keep a permanent cerulean eyes counter up to see how many times that gets mentioned. Because we would be well into like the 40s by now. Anyway, that's right. He was a devil. He had been a devil for 7 years now. He was found by Syrexes and Andreas Gremory from a church orphanage here in Kuo. But that's a story for later. Well, Naruto, he said to himself, here's to another great day. This was Naruto Uzumaki. Which I fully agree with. Cheers to another great day. Long live Putin. See how high the cerulean eyes counter gets in one episode? Nah, it's only mentioned like once or twice, or 3 times in the first chapter usually. It's far better as a permanent counter to see how many times we've encountered YA trash. But
It's like every other author is. They know that cerulean eyes hit, but they cannot exclude them entirely and just.
Personally, my favorite is when the author goes, "They're deep blue eyes, as deep as an ocean," or the sapphire eyes glittering like an ocean deep. Like, I've seen that a couple times, and I just have to roll my eyes in absolute agony. Alright, I'll cue that up for next one. Also, Fairy Tale Dragon Slayer. Because Atin is not here to bitch and moan, I'm gonna go as long as I can. Which, considering the amount of vodka I've been consuming in the span of the past 45 minutes, might not be that long. Because the world is already tilting sideways from me. Yes, only a couple. Arn has suggested that fic, so we'll get to that fic. No, okay.
Isley, I don't believe for a second that the author. That's just impossible.
Gender confusion. Now, this is a fic that I'm interested in reading out loud to everyone. Come on.
Do we have something in Discord chat?
It's something from the Discord chat. Alright, so here it is. I'm gonna drop it on over here as well. Okay. Let's get right back into it. Okay, now leave it to there. What did Isley say? From the paragraph, either the writer is Fummel that has a thing for him, or a guy that's trying to explain why every female is giving him the do me eyes. It just hit me. Ever notice that our blonde-haired, blue-eye MC tends to beat members of inferior races, such as devils and demons, through his superior lineage and powers? Yeah, no, I amusingly enough, I do see that. I will admit, I do see that oftentimes Naruto is described as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed person who then proceeds to stomp all over the other races of whatever genre he's in, and admittedly, most of the times it's Japanese.
Sneaky. I just realized something. This description basically makes Naruto an easy.
Oh yeah, he's Aryan. He's Aryan as hell, man. Don't you know? He's so Aryan that no one ever figured it out. Yes, indeed. Aryan Naruto. I mean, he's even drawn a little bit differently in the show itself. Anyway. Well, little did he know he wouldn't have any more great days for a while. He walked out of his bathroom and started to change into his school uniform. He wore the standard Kuo Academy uniform, which to those who are unaware is a simple suit and tie. He goes on to describe this. Okay, so here's a tip for authors. If you say it's the standard blanka blanka blanka, and the audience who is reading it is supposed to know it as, okay, so say it's the D times D audience, and you say the standard Kuo uniform. Well, the audience who is reading the story already know, or should already know, what the standard Kuo uniform is. So you don't need to then, in the next paragraph, why is it the next paragraph, to describe it. If you would describe it, even though it's a thing I think is silly and don't recommend, you would do it in the same paragraph. Paragraphs are not just a means to break up sections of words. Paragraphs are specifically meant, in English at least, to break up sections of thought. Which means that if you were talking about a uniform, that entire paragraph should be about the uniform in some form or fashion. You would not start a new paragraph and continue to talk about the uniform unless the first paragraph was already going on long enough. The key point when you're writing fan fiction is to both read it out loud, because that helps you find a lot of grammatical errors and whatnot, but also to find the flow of the story. Because a lot of people read as they talk. And if you can read it out loud and it flows fine as you're speaking it, then most people will not find problems when they're reading it in terms of flow. And it's not something that many people pick up on in flow, but it's something that a lot of people will notice subconsciously. It's why a lot of people like Harry Potter, for example. As shit as J.K. Rowling is at writing an actual story, she's very good at the background noise of a story, basically, as it's called. The flow is excellent in the story in terms of events that occur and how it all comes together and all that background noise, while the plot itself might be absolute shite in terms of actually being good. The background stuff is what people subconsciously notice and contribute to the quality of the fiction.
In fact, I say that the flow of the story is much more than actual grammar of the author, at least whenever there are
absolutely, especially when it comes to reading when it comes to writing a fiction story, whether it's fan fiction or original. Hell, even when it comes to writing short stories or research documents, the flow is more important than the grammar at all times. Because if you can explain your idea to someone, even if it's incorrect in the language you're writing it in, at least for English, if the flow is something they can follow, subconsciously, they will ignore grammatical errors. So the flow is by far one of the most important parts of a story. If people can follow along just fine from idea to idea, then you'll have far less critics, even if your story is crap. It's one of the reasons why I follow quite a few of my stories on the favorites list of my fanfiction profile. They're not exactly high-quality stories, but the way they are organized and the way they're written is very smooth. And so you don't notice the problems with the story unless you specifically pause and look for them, which is actually the most important part of a story. It's actually the most important part of writing a story that would sell. It doesn't matter if there's problems in your story. If people will read your story and not notice those problems because they're too busy reading it, that's the key part. That's your life lesson today from Sneaky. I don't know how much more coherent I'll be for the rest of this. We got an hour or more to go, and I'm already like 15 fingers in. Anyway.
Given its fuel for you, you will burn it in.
He walked out of his bathroom and started to change to his school uniform. He wore his black jacket over his open button-up shirt. Open, really, so it's not the standard uniform. He's wearing it customly. He is wearing it so his chest hair bursts out and shows how manly he is to all the women. He wore a deep, dark orange shirt. So, again, like I said, don't say things like he wore the standard uniform and then go on to describe how unstandard his uniform actually is. And that's like, he took a left turn, but in actuality, he did a U-turn flip and landed his car at a 90-degree angle to the sun. Like, you know, don't say, oh, he did a standard blank, or he wears a standard blank, and then go on to customize that standard blank. Just say the outfit. He wore the Kuo Academy uniform with his own personal touches, such as the orange shirt instead of a white one, and the opened button down. You know, like, flow, like I said, very important. He had the standard black pants with black shoes and white trim. He looked in the mirror and put a comb through his hair. It stayed down for a few seconds before going back to its disheveled appearance. He sighed. Giving himself a once-over, he nodded and left his room and made his way downstairs. He lived in a small two-story house. Small two-story house, really.
For a demon adopted by Sir Zax and Remory, that might be small.
Okay, you raise a fair point. Yes, Isley brings up Coral Aran. Yes, Coral Aran is a very good example because he's talking about flow. Coral Aran, to get up more off topic, is a very good Ruby writer. Specifically because he's a long history of editing magazine articles. And you could tell early on in his earlier stories, Core is actually an excellent example in progress of writing and the distinct difference between different forms of writing. So the TLDR on Core is actually a head editor / manager of a magazine in Britain, I believe it was. And in his early stories, you could tell his stories read like a magazine. But the one thing that is universal between both fictional stories and magazines is the flow of the writing. The key point in a magazine is to keep you reading the magazine. So the flow has to be very good. And that is very apparent in his stories throughout all of them. Now, the quality of plot and the quality of the characters obviously improves over time because he's had plenty of time to actually write and learn how to write fiction versus learning how to write a magazine. But the flow of his is very constant in terms of quality. The best way to have a story is to have 15,000 words in a chapter and have the reader go through it like it was 3,000 words. Because that means your flow is of the highest quality, that they didn't notice the length, and that they went through it so quickly because everything just flowed into it. It's the stories that are 3,000 words long but feel like they take forever. It's the stories that are 15,000 words long and feel like they take even longer. Those are the stories that you know the flow is not as good in. Because a good story will make you forget the flow of a story. Good story in terms of flow will make you forget how long the story is. Because you won't be able to notice how long it is until you are finished or see an actual number displayed to you. Because a good story with excellent flow will not feel like the length it is.
The good story with actual flow will make you not notice clicking next.
Indeed, exactly, yes. A good story with actual flow will keep you reading it without even realize you've continuously read it. Anyway, back to this shite story with poor flow.
You know, up until the last couple paragraphs, I wouldn't really call it shite. It started okay, I think.
I did enter into this story with some bias, I will admit, specifically because of how the summary started off. And that is something that both fanfiction and fictional authors do need to focus on as a feature of importance. Because the summary, or aka the back page, or the inner panel, or wherever it's located, the summary is what makes people read your story. It's what makes people... It informs people what to expect from your story in terms of how the writing is phrased, how the story itself will take place. Is the summary mysterious, leading to many questions? Then the story will be a mystery story. Is the summary action-packed? He will fight for the liberation of his people. He will find a way. Etc., etc. The summary of any story, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, the most important part is that it delivers the message of what your story will be like.
Sneaky, I just had an idea, and
Right.
I think that our perspective is missing something, because we're both straight males, and we cannot really judge how appealing this type of summary is for a reader of female demographics. I think we need to ask Isley. At least I think Isley is a girl.
I think we covered this before. I think Isley is in fact male.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because all those summaries, I'm not sure they're that crap.
Alright, yeah. To be fair, I am coming at this with an obvious bias. I am a male. I am straight. I am drunk. I expect certain things out of summaries, and yes, that does give me a bias, and I never have said otherwise. I've never claimed to be neutral. I've never claimed to be unbiased. I've never claimed to be an expert either. However, if you total my favorites list, which I've read all of, if you total my favorites list alone of fan fiction, I've read over 12 million words. of fan fiction alone, let alone the nearly libraries of fiction I've read, original fiction.
Before you found fanfiction.
Before I found fanfiction. I have read an extremely large amount of literary works, fanfiction and otherwise. So if I'm going to come and tell you, hey, from my experience as an expert in reading, this is how summaries should look. You can take it with a grain of salt, but I'm probably right.
I just had a weird idea. Imagine the types of summaries that we speak.
Oh yeah.
On the actual paper books, you open it, read it, what?
Honestly, I have actually, I wish I had my paper books with me. Unfortunately, because I did move across, like, several state lines, I wasn't able to take everything I have with me. But most of the summaries of the personal library I have, most of the summaries make you go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how that turns out. Those are the kind of books I pick up. Those are the kind of books that sell. Well, to be fair, again, I'm biased on that. But not every story can be 50 Shades of Grey fetishistic trash. That appeals to, apparently by the sale of 50 Shades of Grey, appeals to the female section of the population's secret fetish of wanting to be dominated by a rich male.
I honestly have no idea because I haven't read 50 Shades of Grey.
Okay, well, 50 Shades of Grey in America hit the #1 bestseller list of female-oriented fiction for a very long time. Which basically means a crap ton of women purchased 50 Shades of Grey.
God.
Which, if anyone's unaware of what 50 Shades of Grey is, it's male dom, female sub, rich male abuse fiction. Where the rich white guy beats the not rich white woman and she loves him for it. And that was the female bestseller for a very long time. So,
like I said, we're biased.
So while we may be biased, you know. Yeah,
Oh, it's alive.
Oh, okay, it's back on.
No, it's not. It's offline.
Yeah, no, it just showed it was dead for me as well. It should be back online now.
Yeah, like I was saying, this isn't so bad so far. It's kind of shaky, but it's not well enough for me to not
50
want to...
Shades of Grey was also written by a woman. I should mention that. So it's not like a guy is writing a fantasy story. No, it was a woman writing a fantasy story about being dominated by a rich white guy, which then turned out to be the #1 bestseller for like almost a year straight or something like that.
One important thing to note about 50 Shades of Grey, I haven't read it, but I know this. It's a Twilight fanfic.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And yes, in case anyone was unaware, 50 Shades of Grey started off as a Twilight fanfic, which grew immensely popular. So what the author did was replaced vampire with rich.
I was not aware of that.
Oh yeah, no, that was literally the only thing that changed. That is the only thing that changed about 50 Shades of Grey, the Twilight fanfiction, to 50 Shades of Grey, the best-selling book for the women's section. is the author took 50 Shades of Grey, the Twilight fanfic, removed vampire, and made the guy rich instead. And it ended up being the #1 women's bestseller for nearly a year or something. So, yeah. Apparently, all you need to do to be the #1 best women's seller is to write female submissive fan fiction to a rich white guy.
I wonder what kind of stuff there needs to be written for it to be a fanfic and a male. Because I don't think we've seen it yet.
A fanfic and a what?
If Twilight produced 50 Shades of Grey, which is hugely successful,
right,
and among females, then something must produce a fanfic of something that will be hugely successful with males, and I want to see that.
Well, you see, the problem with guys is that typically guys are more frugal. And I don't mean to be like sexist with this, but guys are typically way more frugal. And that I see a lot more guys pirating stuff. I see a lot more guys being like, oh, well, I'll see it when it comes out cheaper. I see a lot more guys delaying gratification of reading or watching something until it's cheaper.
Well, you may be right, yeah.
I'm not saying that people wouldn't buy something. I'm just saying that typically the most popular stuff on the New York bestseller list for men tends to be of the more action-oriented. And even then, a lot more, I can almost guarantee you, a lot more of the audience would be getting it either illegally online or getting it when it was on sale or other sections.
It's quite sad, actually. This means that there is no hugely popular and good fanfic for us.
Well, I mean, that's the thing with as a guy, I will speak for guys. That's the thing I've noticed with men is you have just an absolute scattering of the kind of fic guys will read, and so there's no real way to advertise to the majority, because there's no real majority. It's like, yeah, okay, the majority is action. It's like, okay, yeah, but action's just interesting to watch, so of course the majority is going to be action. But for women, the majority tends to be romance, and romance is a lot more specific and picky, I guess you could say. And a lot more precise than just, oh, there's big fights and explosions. You know?
Yeah. I kind of agree. Even though it's still sad.
Oh, don't. Yeah, it's still sad. Don't get me wrong there. But it is definitely, guys get the bell curve, I guess you could say, in terms of intelligence and in terms of genres that they're interested in. I don't know many guys interested in drama. I don't know many guys interested in romance. A lot more guys are interested in adventure. A lot more guys are interested in action. But at the same time, there's sections of men that are interested in mystery. There's sections of men that are interested in fucking hell, what's the section? Angst. You know, like they're not big, like I say, it's a bell curve. On one side, it's the drama and romance. In the middle, it's the action, adventure, and the heroing stuff. And on the other end of the bell curve, it's the mystery, it's the puzzle piecing, it's the angsting, it's, you know, etc.
I haven't actually met a lot of males angst, like female genre, I think, too.
Well, yes, angst is mainly a female genre, again, I would say, as I've met quite a significant amount of people, and I'm pulling this from the anime clubs I've either headed or been part of. I'm pulling this from real life statistics of schooling that I've joined, etc. Yeah, so angst does tend to be more female variety, but there is a significantly noticeable population of men that are also part of the angst genre.
So Isley says, from what I've easily advertised to men by saying, not a shitty pornofic.
Sneaky, you're not wrong. You can easily advertise to men by saying not a shitty pornofic. That and clever writing, that's harder to advertise. Yeah, people have different tastes, I realize that. Pornofics, I'm not really able to, due to my mental faculties, I'm not really able to say one way or the other when it comes to actual pornography or written pornography.
Actually, on the point of summaries, I have already mentioned it on Discord.
Yeah.
But the best kind of summary that definitely will look in to read something basically says, this is trash, don't read it.
Yeah, I'm actually of the opposite camp. I've said before on Discord, and I've been actually quoted on it before on Discord. You shouldn't let your readers know you think your story is bad. And now, obviously, I am breaking my own statement. In my own fictions, I have said before, this story is bad. Whether it's in the author's note or whatnot. But even if I'm not following my own statement, you don't follow by example. Do what I say, not what I do. Don't let your readers know you think your own story is bad in terms of like actually bad. Be humble, not self-depreciating, is what I'll say. Do you agree with that?
Logically, yes, but my experience with such summaries says no.
Right, fair enough. I just feel like if you include in your summary, this is trash, don't read it, even if it turns out to be a good story, I feel like that shouldn't be in the summary. At minimum, put that in the first chapter's author's note. I feel like the summary should be solely for the story, not the author's opinion on the story, you know?
We're on the different meanings of summaries here. If summary is something that we consider as a bookseller for the actual real paper book, then sure, but if you want people to actually be interested enough to read your fic, I see that it's a bad tactic, but it's still a valid tactic.
Yeah, it's freaking Isley. Porno fics tend to suck. I wouldn't know since I don't read them, but I'll take your word for it. Anyway,
porno fics will suck because mostly people don't.
There's a few porno fics I've accidentally stumbled across because I'm kind of ignorant of this shit. Not even willingly. I just don't get it. The few porno fics I have stumbled across, I read it and go, even me, I'll read it and go, this person's never actually had sex before, have they? Anyway, yes, no, I agree on your point. I don't think any actual original fiction published story should ever have "this is trash, don't read it," unless it's some sort of like blog-esque published work where the whole thing is written in like the first-person perspective of someone talking. then maybe this is trash, don't read it, would be appropriate for that sort of story. But generally, no. If you're published work, you shouldn't be saying this is trash, don't read it. And I generally approach fan fiction and my suggestions towards how to do it as I treat everyone as a prospective potential author of original fiction. Because I think it's a better standard to go by. I think it's a better way to look at fan fiction and be like, okay, I'm going to grade you as if this was original fiction. Because even if they're not ever going to go for that, that's the sort of standard you should hold. Personally, this is what I believe. That's the sort of standard you should hold. Because if you don't hold yourself to that sort of standard of would I see this in a published book, I feel like you let your standards slip and your work gets progressively worse, even if it's not consciously. If you're subconsciously holding yourself to a lower standard with the excuse of because it's fan fiction, I feel like you're going to produce a worse work.
It certainly won't be as edited, but yeah. I've seen a lot of stories that are basically dumb. They are still interesting, but I agree that afterwards going through that and making sure everything flows nicely is certainly something that people should do, even though I've seen a lot of stories that just died being rewritten.
Yeah, no, there is a problem. Again, we were completely ignoring the story we're actually supposed to be covering. And it is a problem on a lot of fictions I see. A lot of them die, and more often than not, these fan fictions that I see die, not because the story itself is bad, or what's going on in the story is difficult to parse to the next chapter, or whatever. More often than not, it's because the author had subconsciously held themselves at a lower standard, and so then when they got to a certain point, they just couldn't think of where to go after that. Because they were subconsciously holding themselves to a lower standard, they didn't exactly plan, okay, X thing happened, what does that mean? They just kind of ignored that and kept writing, and then when they finally got to the result of X thing, they were like, oh shit, what's that supposed to mean? And then they actually sat, because of that, they would sit down and think about their fic and be like, oh, hell, I have no idea what I'm doing. And then the fic would die. Personally, that is my experience with it.
It will try to be rewritten at times, but not often it is successful.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I have seen some absolutely like, whoa, that's a cool idea fics come about. I mean, hell, freaking 3/4 of my favorite list is exactly that. Hello, Slingshot. 3/4 of my favorite list is exactly that. Of, whoa, this is a cool idea. But unfortunately, they're all dead stories. Not because the author was bad, or because the author just didn't know what they were doing, but because the author held themselves, I'm guessing subconsciously, to a lower standard, or they died. But I don't really want to think the author died, because that would be a bit depressing. They held themselves to a lower standard, so they didn't take the time to sit down and think about the work they were working on. And they got to a certain point and were like, oh shit, the butterfly effects are starting to kick in. How the hell do I write this? And when they get to that point, instead of like putting in the time and effort to write past that, which is understandable, it's a lot of time and effort to write a fic that ends up with massive butterfly effects to canon. Completely understandable why someone would be like, look, I just don't have the time to write this. It was a good idea at the start, but now I realize I'm going to have to put way more effort in than I actually can. completely understand.
I think Slingshot is trying to say something.
No, I have no idea what you guys were talking about. Then I heard butterfly effect.
We're talking about fan fiction and how a lot of fan fiction authors end up with dead stories because they don't hold themselves to the same standard as original fiction subconsciously. And so when they write the story, there were more things here and there, but when they actually get to the effects of X and Y thing, they'll end up being like, oh shit, X and Y thing are completely different from canon now. What do I do? And they'll end up dropping the story because they just don't have the time to sit down and plan out the rest of the story like that.
So a lot of fan fiction writers just wake up one morning, decide, oh, I'm going to write a story, and they start writing the story. They don't sit down and plan the story, right? They should always plan a story before you start it. Original fiction, fan fiction, anything. You should at least plan something, before you start doing it.
Like I said, yeah, exactly. Like I said before, and many times in other streams and whatnot, is you should always approach a fan fiction from the same idea as you would approach an original fiction, because not only is that a better way to approach that idea, it gets you into the mindset of actually thinking about everything. So if you do end up writing your own original fiction, you'll actually think about everything because you're already at that point. Because I know a lot of people write fan fiction either as a hobby, just, pastime, or they had a cool idea, or they write fan fiction because they want to be authors. And habits you get, habits you get into the habit too. Habits you get in when you're a fan fiction author aiming to be an original author, you gotta make sure your habits are good. You gotta make sure your habit, instead of forgetting about grammar sometimes, you gotta make sure your habit is to look at every sentence and read it out loud to make sure the grammar is right. You gotta get into the good habits, because if you don't get into the good habits when you're starting off writing, it's gonna be way harder to get into the good habits when you're actually publishing your writing.
Yep. Also, you don't want to depend on your proofwriter to do things, because I've been where they proofread stuff, and these proofreaders are mostly they have no idea what they're proofreading, so they'll just make random changes as they go along.
I mean,
it's horrible.
Yeah. I mean, I always check over what I do give my stuff to other people to proofread, but I do look over their changes and I read it out loud and I read it in my head and I go, okay, is this change for the better of the story or for the worse of the story? Because the proofreader doesn't know how you're thinking, so they're gonna think whatever they think when they proofread your story.
No. I also mean professional proofreaders that the publishers give you. Because publishers will give you a proofreader, but the quality of the proofreader depends on the whim of the proofreader and the publisher.
Right. Exactly. Like, you can't trust the proofreader to catch all your mistakes. You personally also have to go over it. And I do see a lot of authors, I have read a lot of books, where I feel like the author wrote something and sent it off, and then no one sent anything back in terms of, hey, this doesn't quite make sense. And so the author just continued to run with it, and no one ever pointed out the mistake. Because they were like, oh, all my job is to make sure the grammar is correct. And yeah, technically, proofreaders, professional or otherwise, are just there to make sure the grammar is correct. But
also, this is from my personal experience. So I see a lot of writers, especially in Hindi, they get published with smaller publishers with cheaper titles, bad paper quality, cheap hardcovers, etc., etc. And I think most authors should know that the first book they're going to be publishing will always be like that, because they just don't have the money to approach a bigger publisher, or because publishers don't care how good your writing is. All publishers will care about is how much money you can bring in, right?
Yeah, how well it will sell. And that's what we were talking about earlier with 50 Shades of Grey. If like 50 Shades of Grey, it's absolute trash. It is garbage writing.
But
At the very
sold
definition of it.
because
But it sold
because
well.
cheap kinks.
Because it appealed to a certain audience. It appealed to a certain part of that audience that sold well. And it's the same thing for video games. It doesn't matter how shit the game is. If it appeals to a certain aspect of the human psyche, whether it's explosions or whatever, as we've seen from Transformers, if it sells, it sells, and that's what the developer or the publisher cares about. But I personally hold the opinion that you should hold yourself to a standard higher than the publisher or developer cares about.
Yep. But you can also bring up the argument about critics and how bullshit they've become.
Right?
Because
Yeah.
just open Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic and just look at all the recent games, movies, etc., etc.
Right.
You'll see you'll see the critics raving about a game, but the audience hates it, or audience likes a game, but the critics hate it.
I have seen so many in recent times of like, oh, it's a 5% critic review with a 95% reviewer review, and the critics these days are completely out of touch, and you shouldn't rely on critics. You shouldn't rely on critics' opinions of what currently should be happening in your story, or how you should write your story.
Hell, just look at the new Will Smith. Yeah.
Right?
I have actually a counter argument to what has been said recently. From personal experience, if everyone held themselves to the standards of publishing, then some authors that have produced good fanfics over the years wouldn't be there because, for example, it happened to me. I've seen my work and decided that, hey, that's trash. I hold myself to a little bit too high a standard. I cannot write this anymore. And if everyone was of that mindset, then a lot of people wouldn't have improved from their initial naive fanfics and went to write better ones. So you can't always hold yourself to a publishing standard, especially when you're starting.
That is fair. But
fair.
I do say you should hold yourself personally to a standard that says you should improve every day. Because anyone that's watched this podcast in the past, we've encountered authors who have written fan fiction for 10 plus years, and their grammar hasn't improved. Their plot hasn't improved. Their ability to write characters hasn't improved. You are only going to improve as an author not just by writing a lot, but by writing a lot and holding yourself to a higher standard. Whatever that standard is. If that standard is, I'm going to make one less grammatical mistake than I did yesterday, that's still a better standard than some of the people I've seen.
Dude, I think people who say that, oh, you shouldn't judge fanfic authors because most of them are young and they're starting out, I think their hearts are in the right place, but they don't realize that, okay, if you don't judge them, if you don't tell them that, okay, look, this was wrong and you should do better, then they will not do better. And in 5-10 years, they will not improve.
That's not the reality of fanfiction, not because every
Zix?
views. That's great. Just do more of this.
Right.
Yeah.
Better shouldn't comment on what you're writing, but how you're writing it within certain limits. Core actually, while we are completely off topic, I do like to say Fanfiction Contempt Theater is an educational podcast, and this is showing itself right now. Yeah, betas should not have a direct impact on what you're writing. Core Alaran, who I use as an example because he is the epitome of examples in terms when it comes to writing fan fiction, growing from writing fan fiction, and how to interact with people. So Core Alaran had a story he was writing. It was a comedy story. However, his beta thought it was a romance story. and they were completely not communicating because they thought the other thing. So his beta thought Core thought it was a romance story. And Core thought his beta thought it was a comedy story, even though they thought completely differently. And so when his beta would make recommendations, Core thought he was making those recommendations as a humorous recommendation. So Core would do that, because he could see the humor in that occurrence. But then the beta would get mad because he thought Core was misunderstanding him, because he thought Core thought it was a romance story. Right, exactly. And so it all came to a head where the story got completely derailed. It was out of control. The author hated the story at that point, and the author finally sat down with some of his free time and was like, look, what are you suggesting? And they sat down and hashed it out, and they cleared up the confusion that they all felt for each other. So now the beta's on the same page. But the main problem isn't that the beta thought it was a romance. The main problem is that Core let the beta say what should the story be. And while it's all fine and dandy to have someone else go through the story and be like, oh, this would be a funny scene, it still should be, at the end, the author's choice what to and what to not include. But Core was just like, oh, I trust this beta, whatever he says I'll put into the story. And that's not how you should write a story, whether it's an original fiction or not. Because at the end of the day, the only person who knows how you think, and the only person who knows how you write, and the only person who knows where you want to take the story is you.
Yourself. Yeah.
So while you should take your betas and your proofreaders and your editors' recommendations with a thoughtful thought, at the end of the day, how the story goes is how you think it should go, not how other people think it should go. And that's more useful to fanfiction authors than original authors, because fanfiction authors have way more audience interaction as they're writing the story. Because I've seen many stories in fanfiction communities completely derail themselves and just destroy themselves because the author saw a comment or a review or a PM that they were like, oh, that's a good idea, and they threw it into the story because they thought it was a good idea. And then when it actually got to the point where the butterfly effects were being felt, they were like, oh shit, this completely derailed the story.
I will just kind of quote a story that I have in a summary. Hey, I'm new to this fandom, but I'm super hyped, ready to, and I'm welcome to any ideas of where it's going to flow.
Oh, no.
The quote of summaries that died everywhere. Anyway, before we get back onto the topic of this absolute edgy McEdge story, Isley says, would you say it's advisable to have a worm fanfic as your first fanfic? I asked due to me having started on it and being out of my depth completely. I'm under no illusion that being on the same level as people is Core. I'm not that deluded, but I prefer to have my first one not be a complete bomb. Humans grow best under stress, give a new person hell, and they will drastically improve real quick. Yes, that is true, Isley. I don't recommend Worm as your first fanfic. You can certainly do so, but you should always expect your first fiction to be a complete bomb. You don't know what you're doing wrong until you do it wrong. You don't know you are screwed until you have experienced being screwed.
Oh, that's such a good advice you do.
You have to fail before you know how to succeed.
And boy, are you good at failing.
I am very good at failing. I'm glad you could join us finally.
I'm thrilled too. Comcast finally decided that it was warm enough to let my internet work.
Excellent.
So it's not insulation, it's the temperature.
Yeah, like I said, the installation of the cables, the copper was warping. And so it was messing with the signal he was getting. But at the end of the day, my point is you should hold yourself to a higher standard, whatever that standard may be. Whether it's getting one less grammatical error, or it's improving the characters and how you do the plot, or it's holding yourself to such a high standard that you don't realize you are improving. I've seen every form and fashion work for different authors. It all depends on your personality and how you approach the problem that is your ability to write a story. But in the case of Isla's question of Worm is an extremely long story. It's 1.1 million words long, which roughly translates to about 10, 11-ish books. Which is a lot of words. And if you're going to try and write that as your first story, you have to keep a lot in mind. There is a lot of butterfly effects that will occur due to the slightest difference in word. So you got to be prepared for that. And if you're not prepared for that, your story's going to crash and burn. For example, I just went through my... I follow a lot of Worm stories. But a lot of these Worm stories are on fanfiction.net. So I just went through my list of bookmarks that mark these non-fanfiction.net stories. And I would say almost 90% of them are dead stories. Simply because the author got, say, around 20,000 words in, and were like, holy shit, I am way out of my depth. The powers I gave the character are completely hurricane-level butterfly effect on just like the first couple arcs of Worm fiction.
Okay, Sneaky, you gotta explain Worm to me.
Alright, so Worm is superpowers, but with a dark, realistic twist.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Really.
Yeah, no, it's a web serial. So which means he released it for free on the internet. Every couple of weeks, he would release a chapter. It's about a world that's mirrored after our own, in which...
So you say it's set in what, 2008, 2009?
2011. Like I said, it is, because that's when it started. It's literally our world, except back in 1960-something, a creature showed up, and ever since then, everyone, if they were in a high-stress situation, would get superpowers based on that situation. So if it's like, oh, I am being suffocated to death, maybe you'll get the power to teleport. Or maybe you'll get the power to not need to breathe. Or maybe you'll get the power to crush whatever's, suffocating you. Or, etc., etc., etc. Or maybe you'll get the power to create a device that makes you breathe infinite oxygen or something. Like, the sequel has already come out. It's an amazingly good story in terms of a realistic take on superpowers. It's an amazingly good story in terms of twists that are thrown at you that you just were like, wow, this completely breaks X trope. Like, I did not see this coming, I did not see that coming, I didn't see that coming. The author does an excellent job of it all. Mostly because the author, when writing the story, actually said everyone is disposable, even the main character. There was no plot armor. When certain events occurred that had certain death penalties attached to it, he literally would roll dice to see if X character survived.
I mean, that's actually a good idea because I see a lot of fanfiction, especially fanfiction writers get attached to their characters and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You just created them, right? You just...
Right.
They don't exist. That you don't need to get attached to them. They're tools.
Right. Exactly. And I see
well, as you say,
of...
that's one of the reasons we rail against specifically self-insert OCs, but OCs in general, because people are like, no, this is my special character. They need to get through the story. No, they don't.
No.
Well,
no.
Go ahead, Zeeks.
I disagree, but mostly because not because they're their characters and that attached to them, but because it's going to be a complete train wreck for an author like this to continue to write this story when his major character has died. It's very hard to recover from that.
Wildbow, the author of Worm, actually commented on that, and he said, in a question, in an interview, he was asked, what would happen if Taylor died? Because he had previously mentioned that if Taylor could die at any time, he actually rolled the dice to see if she lived or not. If Taylor, the main character, had died, he said he would keep following the story by point of view hopping to another character until the world either ended or lived. Because that was the end of the Worm, is the world ended or lived. And he said the story could have gone completely differently depending on which character died or survived in X scenario.
Oh, Sneaky. Imagine if Eidolon died early on.
Oh yeah, no, like I said,
that would have made things different.
He completely rolled the dice for every single character to see if they lived or died in any situation. So, like, then what we know as Worm could have turned out 3,000% differently, depending on what the dice said.
Well, because he was even willing to let Armsmaster die against the Leviathan.
Yeah, he was willing to let any character die at any time.
I think that Eidolon dying would have the most major effect.
Oh yeah,
any other character
I would
dying.
certainly love to see a fiction based on that, honestly. But you know, a lot of fictions are obviously Taylor focused because Taylor ended up being the main character throughout the whole story. But I think personally that fanfiction authors restrict themselves too much. I think personally that I see a lot of stories that could have gone far better if they just weren't shoveling the main character into the main character spot.
Yeah.
That's not really a fanfiction author mistake. Well, not mistake, it's not a habit of... basically, every fiction is like that. There are very...
you are correct. I've actually seen... In the hundreds of original fiction stories I've read, I've seen, like, one that pulled out in the middle of a story, surprise! The main character wasn't who you thought they were, cause lol, the person you've been reading about just died. I see that happen.
Zeke's raised that point, though, that's because it's, you know, if you have a story and you're telling it and you let your main character die, it's very hard to keep going at.
Yeah, which, to be fair, I completely understand why people would be like, oh, I don't want to kill the main character, because you put a lot of effort into describing the main character, you put a lot of effort into developing the main character, you put a lot of effort into getting the audience attached and wanting to read about the main character and their adventures. And it's completely understandable why you would like, oh, well, they don't die because blah, 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 blah. That's understandable. Which is why it takes immense writing skill. I will not lie on that. It takes absolutely colossal writing skill to write a story in which the main character dies and it's still interesting to read.
I think if you kill too many characters, then the audience will lose interest, because what do they care about?
Because they're attached to the characters more than they are to the
I have a counter argument.
Right.
Robert Martin.
Alright, go ahead.
Or was it George Martin? I don't remember. The author of
George R.R. Martin. He is the author of
George. He kills characters off far too often.
Yeah.
Like, and I understand he's like, oh, no one is safe, and yes, that adds a certain amount of tension, but there are some characters who clearly have been allowed to survive when they should not.
I think it's the difference between Wildbow and George R.R. Martin, in that Wildbow was willing to write the story in any direction, depending on who died and who lived, while George R.R. Martin had a certain idea of how the story should go, so just killed off characters when he didn't need them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And while they both killed off a lot of characters, they both did it for different reasons. One did it to just go with the flow. The other did it because, oh, what a twist! Blank character is dead.
Well, and initially it was actually good. Like at the beginning of A Song in Ice and Fire, when, oh, you did just kill what everyone thought was the main character. That was a great twist, even if it did make me angry.
I mean, I've not read A Song of Ice and Fire because too long. I mean, I did for a while, but I really lost interest because everyone kept dying.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that.
That is the downside. Is the draw to continuously reading a series is the characters. It's not the plot. It's the characters and the flow. And I've talked about this before, and I'll continuously talk about it forever. What draws people to a story is three things: the plot, the characters, or the setting.
Yeah.
And the biggest draw, and will forever be the biggest draw to any story, is the characters.
Yeah.
What gets people to read the story is the setting. What gets people to continue reading the story is the plot. What gets people to read the next book is the characters. You can succeed as a one-shot book or a one-shot fiction with just two of the three. But if you want to write more than one, if you want to write a sequel, if you want to write a series, if you want to write a whatever, you need to have all three. And that takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort, it takes you fucking up, and it takes you messing up, and it takes you learning from those mistakes. And that's a problem, and it's the reason why I started this podcast. A major problem I see in the fanfiction community is the unwillingness to admit that you have made a mistake in writing the characters, in writing the plot, or in writing the setting.
No one wants to accept if they've made a mistake.
Because it's hard. Hard, especially if you put your heart and soul into it.
Completely. I absolutely agree, and I completely understand why. However, that understanding doesn't change the facts. I understand you might have put hours into a story to just write the character. You might have put days or weeks or months into writing the first chapter to get it just right in your mind. That doesn't mean it's perfect. And it certainly means that you have to admit to yourself that regardless amount of the time and effort you've put into something, it's not going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. There's going to be flaws in your writing. And if you never admit that, you're never going to improve. And for some people, that's fine. But I'm of the opinion that everyone should be willing to improve themselves.
Yep. Okay.
Anyway, back to this trash story, or we can move on. It's I think we should actually move on. This is an edgy story. It got us talking about some things, and that's honestly all it really needed to do, because we all knew it was an edgy trash story. We knew that coming into it. We knew that leaving it.
Okay, so what are you guys going to read next?
So what we're going to read next is we either have the choice of a Harry Potter High School D×D story called The Roar of Kyoto's Wizarding Lion, which is so edgy, its name has just cut me.
I was going to say, let's just go with that. Like, I don't think we need anything else. Let's just go with that.
Or we can do Gender Confusion, a Naruto story in which Deidara has gender confusion.
What?
Listen.
The profile pic is Deidara in a skirt.
Listen. I already hate life, I'm teetering on the brink here. Let's save that for next week.
Fair enough. It's
Listen,
going in
listen,
the next
My
week.
aunt was down. I had to spend all day driving around in the snow to pick up a suit jacket for my father's birthday, which is fine, but it's snow and it's terrible.
You know why we should keep that for next week?
Why is
Because
that?
this, to my surprise, actually sounds interesting.
Fair enough. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
The audience has spoken. We shall do the edge.
Plus, you don't have to.
And I will need a break. I will be back in.
Yes, please. Go ahead. All right. So, in the interest of everyone's sanity, we're all going to take a momentary 5-minute break. To
A 5-minute
piss.
break. That'll be the end of the show, man.
What the hell are you talking about? Oh, maybe.
It's already 7.
I said I was gonna keep going because you weren't here to bitch, whine, and moan about how long this was going on for.
Oh, all right. We're gonna keep going. All right, sure.
You do it. It's New Year. It's the New Year's celebration, and I'm drunk. So I have a far higher tolerance for shit than I do normally.
Should be playing Dota.
I'm about 21 fingers into the 80 proof vodka. Okay.
Truly, you are from Jersey. Only an iron liver could survive that.
So we shall all take a temporary break, and we shall reconvene in mere moments.
Yes.
Alright, everyone, we're back!
What? Okay.
And
Welcome
we
back,
discussed
everybody.
many things while muted, and the answer to your questions are yes. I'm glad we cleared that up. Anyway, Isley says when it comes to George R.R. Martin, he kills them very often. Yeah, as a general rule, I found you should keep character death impactful, but few and far in between. Yes, we talked about that earlier with the whole losing your audience thing because you kill the characters off that they feel liked. I found it tends to either be they'll admit no fault, or they'll be like me and have such thorough knowledge of how badly they fucked up that you never get anywhere. That's called the Cougar-Dunning effect, or Dunning-Cougar effect.
Yeah.
Whatever. Basically, the Dunning-Kruger effect is you're either smart enough to realize how much you don't know, or you're too stupid to realize how much you don't know. So, smart people will think themselves dumb because they recognize how much they don't know. But dumb people will think they're smart because they're too dumb to realize how much they don't know. And more often than not, I see a lot of fanfiction authors err on the side of, I'm too dumb to realize what I don't know.
I mean, that was a Socrates quote. I know that I know nothing.
Yeah. Right, exactly. I'm smart enough to recognize that I know nothing. People complain about length. Yeah. Okay, so, as far as my comments go on length before we start the next story, if you have a short story, if you're releasing a fan fiction with around 2K words per chapter, you should be releasing that at least once a week, at minimum. Look, I have written 2K words before. It took me an hour. And I realize not everyone is like that. But if you're going to write 2K words, and if you're going to write 2K word chapters, those are extraordinarily short chapters. In terms of how much you can get done in plot development in 2K words is way less than most people realize. I watched a story that did 2K word chapters take 18 chapters for the character to walk through the room.
To be fair, that's a bad story.
No, it was a good story. He was looting the room and he was like observing things and fighting people, but it took him 18 chapters to get through the room. Which is fair enough if you're releasing that in a 2-parter 18K-ish chapter once a month. Completely reasonable. But instead, those 18 chapters took 2 years.
Whoa.
It's really a bad publishing habit because I've read one story from our local.
Right.
And he started putting out like 300 words, 500, 700 words. It's not really chapters, just bits and pieces of his story.
Exactly.
And as it wasn't going anywhere nearly quick enough for me to continue to read it because I burned out.
Right. That is the thing with short chapters, is you need to update very often, especially if the pacing is quick. Because, as Vision Shot says here, you have to consider the pacing, and that's true. If your story is like a fluffy, everything's fine, it's just a silly little slice of life story of Naruto, whatever. Yeah, 2K chapters are fine. People aren't waiting on the edge of their seats for the next chapter. There's no real rush there. But if it's like, it's an action-adventure story in which the hero fights off the bad guys from the start and everyone gets stronger as time goes on. But you release a 3K chapter once every 4 months, and each chapter ends with a cliffhanger. I say this because I've seen authors do this, and I've dropped stories before because it's, you know, an action adventure or a drama or whatever, insert here story, and the pacing did not match the genre. The update rate did not match the pacing. And it was like, oh yeah, I'll update with a 3K word chapter once every 5 years. And it's going to be an action-adventure epic story that starts at the beginning of Harry Potter. And will go through all 7 years. It's like, yeah, this story's never getting done. And so I've dropped stories for that. And while it's more of a problem when it comes to fan fiction, it is something you do need to come and keep in mind when you're writing original fiction, whether it's going to be a web serial in which you post every chapter as it comes along, or whether it's a an original published fiction. Pacing is extremely important and wildly varying when it comes to what genre you're writing for. Fucking romance stories, you could have 7 chapters take place in a single day. A slice of life type story, 1 chapter might be the span of a month in the same amount of words as the romance story. It completely depends on what kind of genre you're writing for, and I think that's where a lot of authors fail. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they just don't write to the pacing their genre demands.
Yeah, that's true.
To be honest, I haven't really encountered that problem.
Really?
So, yeah, I haven't. So it's not that common, I think.
Right. Well, I think specifically for fan fiction, and specifically because, to bring us back on track, this is a Harry Potter harem story. Harem stories have a massive problem in which there's a lot of characters that require screen time. They're not just side characters that show up every chapter or every other chapter or whatever. These are characters that are supposed to be part of the main cast. And this is the part where the medium comes into play. In writing, you can only talk about one character at any time. In a movie...
You're wrong.
What?
You're wrong.
I am?
Harem in fanfiction, the only thing means our main character is going to fuck this, and this. It doesn't need more exposition than that.
That is fair enough. Harem stories do tend to be just X character fucks X. This is true. This is completely true. But the problem, like I said, we're going to get right into the story after I say this. The problem is, personally, I find with lots of harem stories, is X character fucks X, and it's implied that they're like, and the author obviously mentions it like every couple of chapters of, oh, I love Naruto or Harry so much, I'm so deeply in love with them. But they get 0 freaking screen time, because all the screen time is going to the next harem character that's gonna join the harem, which is really just the author's power fantasy of X character screwing X character. And that's what most of the harem stories end up being. It's, oh yeah, they're totally in the harem, trust me. They'll show up like once a chapter and say how much they love Harry, but then we're gonna focus on the new harem character and Harry's or Naruto's newest acquisition. Anyway. As I was saying, railroad into this story. Let's go. It is found in the Discord link down below, whether you're in the description or in the panels, depending on Twitch or YouTube. The roar of Kyoto's wizarding lion. When the Goblet of Fire spits out 2 names for the Hogwarts champion at the same time, Dumbledore is beyond stunned. Because one of those names is an underage student, and the other is of a person who was thought dead long ago. Now this person has come to Hogwarts to tear shit up!
Sneaky, 1 moment. Between Hogwarts and tear, there is no 2. It's an and. So, how does that sentence even make sense?
and tear shit up. That's how. Because they're putting emphasis by using capitals instead of italices. And they're using period, which is another way to perform emphasis, but only when you're speaking.
Okay, yeah.
So technically it should be read as, and now this person has come to Hogwarts, and tear shit up. Technically it should be, and to tear shit up, even though it's supposed to be read like, tear, pause, shit, pause, up,
Up. Yeah.
Wrong boy
what's
who lived. Huh?
What's WBWL?
Wrong boy who lived. It's a very common trope in the Harry Potter fandom, which means basically Harry Potter, the main character, isn't the person that Voldemort attacked on the night of Harry Potter's Harry Pottering. And instead his brother or his sister or etc., miscellaneous family member that didn't exist until this point, was the person who was instead attacked and the person who instead killed Voldemort. But somehow still the prophecy refers to actually Harry instead of the person who Voldemort attacked. Typically it's a really shitty trope that authors use to excuse the fact that Harry Potter didn't grow up among his family members, which for some reason are suddenly alive. And typically it's used to be like, oh, even though Harry Potter's family is still alive, he's for some reason ostracized and hated by his family, so he basically grew up the same way as in canon.
But that's... Okay, the more you analyze it, the less sense it makes.
Exactly.
Because all of those things are trash.
Because I have yet to see a Wrong Boy Who Lived fic that isn't absolute garbage. In fact, you will not find a Wrong Boy Who Lived fic in my favorites or follows list, even though you can't see my follows list. You will not find it there, because every single one I have read has had such out-of-character meat puppet level personalities that it's just been like, why the hell am I reading this fic? The characters are not the characters. The setting is basically not the setting. The author is ignoring more plot holes than J. frickin' K. Rowling did. Yes, and as Arn says, the Wrong Boy Who Lived trope typically comes with the extra trope of the miscellaneous family member being believed to be the real blank who lived. And for some reason, the parents are like, oh, well, you know how we had 2 kids? Well, screw that one. This is the real prophesized one. And therefore, we gotta ignore everything about parenting to only focus on the prophesized one. Letting the other one grow up to be as edgy as possible.
In fairness, Lily is a
If you can't tell, I have a large amount
but
of
James
disdain.
is an absolute arsehole.
Yeah. James, apparently the fandom absolutely hates Harry's father. Yeah, he was a dick. True. But the way the fandom sometimes writes Harry's father is like, what if James was basically Hitler?
Yeah.
I shit you not. I have actually found a fic where James was straight up magical Hitler.
Oh man, magical Hitler.
And I was just like, what the hell? At some point, it's not fanfiction if you take the names and write a completely different story, or is that the point of fanfiction? The point of fanfiction is to ask what-if questions. That's what I say, at least. The point of fan fiction is they go, what if Harry had a particularly bad day, or Vernon punched him in public and CPS got called on them and he was taken away from that house? Or what if Harry had a really bad day and teleported away, except because he was accidentally teleporting, he teleported to an alternate dimension? Just, literally, it's magic. You can literally throw out any bullshit excuse as to why blank is happening, but there still has to be reasoning behind it, and that's what a lot of people miss. They're like, oh, blank is the boy who lived, and Harry is not the boy who lived, but he's technically the still prophesized one. So he grows up to be neglected and abused, because I don't know how human interactions work. No, honestly, that's what you find in the majority of popular quote-unquote fan-fiction writers. Is they honestly don't. Zeeks can back me up on this. A lot of the quote-unquote popular fics are absolute garbage. And I don't know why they are popular, but it can certainly be said the authors don't know how human interaction works, because the characters just completely act inhumane in terms of how they react to things. It's like, I have two children. One is prophesized to kill the Dark Lord. Well, better abuse the second one and distance themselves as far as possible from the family for some esoteric reason. And if it's a Naruto story, typically Naruto ends up for some reason having the sex with his mother. Because, what? Yeah, for some reason, a lot of Naruto stories and where they're like, Naruto isn't the real Kyuubi Jinchuriki, he's the Jinchuriki for the body of the Kyuubi, while the yin and yang go to his sisters / brothers. And so the family ignores him. And then, like, 3 chapters in, the mother, like, falls for this version of Naruto and is, like, madly in love with him and proclaims to be his love slave as repentance for the mistakes she made as she abused and ignored him previously.
Sneaky, there is a vast difference between Wrong Boy Who Lived and Naruto. Wrong Boy Who Lived is generally trash fic, but it's a story-driven fic. Naruto's sister is almost exclusively smart.
Yes, that is fair enough. Wrong Boy Who Lived does tend to try to be plot. And Naruto, the wrong Jinchuriki Who Lived, does tend to be purely power fantasy smut.
Also, however much I like Harry Potter, almost every fic out there does one thing that, if you think about it, is completely unnatural.
Right.
I'm willing to tolerate it, but it's still bullshit. They make 11-year-olds sound like adults.
Yes, that is like I said, this goes back to my original point of fan fiction. Most fan fiction authors that are popular don't understand human interaction. Is a lot of fan fiction authors seem to have the trouble sitting down and going, what does an 11-year-old say? Because they end up writing all of their characters as whatever age they personally are. So whether that person, so say the author's 15, the 30-year-olds sound 15, the 100-year-olds sound 15, and the 6-year-olds sound 15. And you can tell. And
3-year-old sound 15.
Like, or you have the 20-year-old who's for some reason writing Harry Potter fanfic, and they're like, this is what I would do in this situation, so therefore Harry would do. Because they're not actually separating what you would do when presented with a situation and what Harry Potter the character would do in a situation. a lot of authors first think of their fan fiction ideas as in, I would change blank about the story, and then they would try and write the story with blank being changed. But the problem there is that Harry Potter or Naruto or Ichigo or whoever you're writing the fan fiction about wouldn't do that.
I just realized something.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, Ron's speech is almost always his age. He is always iddy and dumb.
Right. Yeah. That's another. That's called bashing. A lot of fanfiction authors I've seen typically dislike X character, and so they'll take the negatives of said character, and because that's all they personally can consciously understand about that character, they'll turn it to 11. And so Ron says something stupid, and they'll be like, I don't like Ron. And so then Ron suddenly turns into a fascist, racist, sexist bigot who's like, I believe all women should be my slaves, and blacks are inferior, and hail Hitler.
What?
Look, I've actually seen stories that were like that with Ron, and where Ron was just completely so not Ron, it was just like, what the hell is going on? And it's because the author disliked Ron, so they viewed every interaction under that lens of Ron as a terrible, stupid person. And they're like, oh, well, Ron said X dumb thing, instead of being because he's a freaking teenager who has minimal social interaction with people beyond his family, he's actually Hitler!
Poor Ron. I like Ron. Ron is a likable character.
Well,
We need a fic where
Ron is an understandable character. That's what he really is
Yeah.
at the end of the day. Ron's an understandable character. He's not really good at anything. He's overshadowed in everything by his older brothers, whether that's because they're smarter, they're braver, they're cooler, they have better jobs, they're investigating things that people normally don't, they're learning things that people normally don't. They're particularly successful at things that people particularly aren't normally successful at. He's overshadowed in everything. And all of his brothers have done everything that he could possibly do. He's not exceptional at anything. He's the run-of-the-mill average kid who just happens to be stuck in the position of being overshadowed by every single one of his brothers in at least one thing. And so he has nothing to surpass. He has no expectations for him set, because ex-brother already did that. So if Ron does it, then it's like, oh, well, of course you do it. You're related to your brother.
I don't understand this actually, because one thing that Ron's going for him, and no other brother has that, he's a friend of Boy Who Lived. He can already define himself with that, so his inferiority complex is kind of, I don't understand that.
No, his inferiority complex is actually understandable if you sit down and look at it from the perspective of Ron has only really had social interaction with his brothers. His brothers who have gone on to be dragon trainers. His brothers who have gone on to be, well, technically not high-ranking, but at the same time high-ranking ministry officials. Who have gone on to be curse breakers who travel around the globe, who have gone on to be alchemical inventors of devices not seen before in wizarding society.
And don't forget super famous candy makers too.
Yeah, like, the problem is to Ron's perspective, all he has ever encountered in terms of people is exceptional individuals who have found their niche and ran with it. And here he is with all these expectations on him of, oh, because he's related to these people, he's obviously going to find something himself. But he personally can't find anything that he's good at. That one of his brothers hasn't done before. Because to his perspective, for Ron, if he's good at curse breaking, oh, he's just like Charlie. If he's good with animals, oh, he's just like Bill. If he's good with potions, oh, he's just like George and Fred. You know,
and this is something that that anyone who actually has a sibling will know. But if you go to the same school that your sibling went, it will very often like if they're the same teachers will say, "Oh, you're so and so's brother, sister, whatever."
Yeah, that has happened.
And then when you do well, the problem there is when you do well, oh, you did it faster than the rest of the class, just like blank.
Yeah. And of course, now granted, sometimes nepotism is a wonderful thing. I literally napped my way through French class because the French teacher was a horrible human being who played favorites, and if she was your sibling, she automatically liked you. I literally napped through the entirety of my French class and still got an A. Which is horrible. But I was ex-sibling's brother, and there I was good. And I remember in one of my philosophy classes, at one point my teacher said, "Oh, wow, your brother said almost the exact same thing." And I was like, I need to find a way to change my opinion. I can't have the same opinion as most of the idiot. Yeah, and so it doesn't really happen a ton in the Harry Potter books, but like everywhere Ron would go, it would say, it would be, he introducing himself. I'm Ron Weasley. Oh, are you the Dragon Trainer's brother?
You're related to Fred and George? Oh, you're related to Charlie? Oh, you're related to Bill? Oh, are you the brother to, Percy? Like I said, J.K. Rowling was very good at the background stuff in her stories.
Yeah.
But, anyway, I'm trying to get back to this whole premise of this story that we should have been talking about for a while now.
Okay, speaking of bashing.
Yeah.
Dumbledore / Brandon / Ron / Hermione / Molly / Ginny bashing.
Yeah.
Lemons.
Boy, that's
Harry
a lot of
Harry.
bashing.
What? Yeah.
Dumbledore. Who the hell is Brandon? Dumbledore,
no
Ron,
idea.
Hermione, Molly, Ginny bashing. Okay. The problem I have with bashing is not that you dislike the characters. It's entirely understandable to, as a fanfiction author, be like, oh, well, Molly is a shrill bitch, or Ginny is a stalking weirdo. That's entirely within the realms of interpretation when it comes to fanfiction.
Or Dumbledore's a manipulative asshole.
Yeah.
Like,
the problem I personally have with bashing is, I do see some authors use it incorrectly because they don't quite understand what bashing is in of itself. And the bashing, as I previously stated with Ron, is when you dislike an X character. Brandon is the evil boy who lived. Okay. Bashing is when you dislike, say, Dumbledore, and go, okay, I dislike Dumbledore, and unconsciously or consciously look at every action of Dumbledore's and be like, oh, he's clearly evil and plotting something. He's actually the real Dark Lord. But that's the point. Bashing is when you completely take a character out of I don't even know the word. When you just take a character and be like, okay, this is how they interacted with people, I'm going to extrapolate something completely different than the intention. Now, don't get me wrong. I've seen plenty of not quite so good Dumbledore fics where Dumbledore is like a manipulative ass who looks at everything like it's a chessboard. But he's not evil. He's just like, okay, if I say this thing to this person, that will get me to this objective. And because this objective ultimately does more good things for more people, therefore it's okay. I've seen excellent stories that have portrayed Dumbledore like that. I've seen excellent stories who portrayed Ron as the idiotic shut-in who had too much to live up to, so he just decided to be an ass because he didn't know what to do with his life. And you know, like
I've seen an interesting story actually.
Yeah.
It's very short, but the premise is not something that I've seen a lot of. Percy goes investigating Dumbledore. Digs up a lot of shit on him.
No, honestly, no one here has a kid.
As a result, he gets a visit from Dumbledore.
Oh yeah.
And Dumbledore, it turns out, he placed tracers on everything that could lead to his dealings. But it turns out that Dumbledore is actually Grindelwald, because Dumbledore wasn't able to best him, and since then Grindelwald was impersonating him all the time. And that's a twist I like.
Yeah, that's actually, I was going to say,
that's a bit of an excessive twist in terms of believability, but that's an interesting way, that's an interesting take on it. That's a story I would still read sheerly for the idea.
Yes.
And where the author goes. It's not a story I would read because it's good or because I agree with that sort of plot. It's a story I would read specifically because that idea is different.
Anyway, shouldn't we actually start with that?
Yeah, we should start reading, yes. I don't understand how someone stays motivated to write that much fan fiction. It's actually quite easy. Honestly, it's the author getting attached to certain characters. It's the difference between George R.R. Martin and, say, I don't know, Tolkien. Tolkien liked his characters. Tolkien liked his characters winning, so that's what he wrote.
But
R.R. Martin liked the setting. R.R. Martin liked the plot. So that's what he wrote.
He also liked being able to kill people without getting in trouble for it.
Yeah. Now, the whole point of this is that there's many reasons for motivation to continue writing a fan fiction. Sometimes it's because the author has OCD and must finish everything they do. Sometimes it's because the author is really committed to the idea of their fan fiction. Sometimes it's because the author just really likes Harry Potter, or really likes Naruto, or really likes insert fandom here, and it just has enjoyment writing a fan fiction for it. Sometimes it's the author doesn't even like the story, but the audience does, and so they do it out of obligation of having introduced the story to finish it.
I think I've read somewhere Cor Alaran is going to explore Ruby until he's exhausted Barry.
Dude, you just cut in and out so hard, we didn't understand a single thing you said.
Yeah, something
really?
about Cor.
Yeah.
Oh, a second.
Yeah, to be fair...
How about that?
Yeah.
Is that better?
I don't know until you talk a lot.
Yeah.
Let's try. Like I said, Cor Alaran said somewhere, I think, that he's going to be fun bearings.
Yeah, you just
cut in and out. It's like Discord isn't allowing him to talk about Cor.
It's like Discord just specifically dislikes Zeke's talking about things. Lupine Horror specifically wrote Fate's Gamble in 1 year, and it's 1.1 million words long. And that was because he really enjoyed writing it. And you can lose yourself in writing things. I mean, it's entirely possible, it's entirely understandable. But the key part is to enjoy what you're doing. Like I said before, we're going to get into the story right after I make this point. There's a lot of ways to keep yourself writing fanfiction. Whether it's out of obligation because you personally feel that obligation is one of the most important things you can do in life. Whether it's out of enjoyment because you really enjoy the fandom and therefore you want to complete the fanfiction. Or whether it's out of mental disorder, which makes you obsessive about completing everything you do. There's a lot of motivations. for why you would write a fan fiction and why you would complete a fan fiction. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, what matters is whether you complete the fan fiction or not. Whether you think through the fan fiction or not. Whether you write it or not. The word count doesn't really matter. Your update speed sort of does matter in terms of if you want people to read it. But other than that, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, writing fan fiction is up to you. It's up to your personality. It's up to your fanaticism for the fandom you're writing in. It's different for everyone. So there's no real advice to give. There's no real sayings to give. There's no real declarations to give when it comes to, oh, this is how you write a fan fiction. Oh, this is how you continue writing a fan fiction. That's specifically why our fan fiction podcast here only focuses on the first chapter. And we don't really focus on the fan fiction itself. We more focus on the plot holes. We more focus on the beginning chapter. We focus on the parts that make people read more. We focus on the parts that make people comment, that make people read it, that make people review it, that make people recommend it, that make people continue writing for it, that give inspiration to others. The first chapter, the first sentence, the first paragraph, the first summary.
Sneaky, I question your ability to focus anything after 20 fingers of volume.
This is true. My ability
he is actually holding up remarkably well.
My ability to align myself is more specifically aligned to the fact that I have a notepad open telling me what to say. Anyway,
Sneaky, that's
we have waffled on long enough. Let's get straight into this god awful wrong boy who lived
value our soul
garbage. Hello everyone, this is a Harry Potter D times D fic. It's been hanging around in my mind for a long time. I couldn't take it anymore, so I started writing it. For some information, it starts during the Goblet of Fire at the time the champions are selected for the tournament. It's a wrong boy who lived, so Brandon Potter will be making his not triumphant return, but slightly, I cannot stress the slightly enough, more competent Harry. Well, you'll just have to wait and see. Normal speech, blah blah blah, blah blah blah, blah blah blah. Basically, he gives an index of how to interpret the speeches that are given in here with various emphasizing. Which, I will say, while not exactly acceptable in original fiction, it's nice to have in fan fiction, because like right here it's a D times D fic, so there's gonna be flashbacks, there's gonna be Sacred Gear talking to the person, there's gonna be Sacred Gear shouting things, there's gonna be Sacred Gears thinking about things, there's gonna be characters thinking things, there's gonna be characters saying things. So if you're gonna have multiple ways of speaking, if it's not just all gonna be, okay, this is thought, this is speech, if you're gonna have multiple ways of saying things and multiple ways of thinking and multiple ways of emphasis, it's important to tell the audience that. This is specifically for fan fiction. Because original fiction, especially published fiction, depending on the language, is completely different in how it's handled in terms of emphasis and whatnot. Like, for example, in Korean light novels and Japanese light novels, ability names and like declarations and etc. are placed in upside and downside brackets and bolded.
I have just realized that there's one certain type of crapfic that I haven't actually seen ever.
Right.
And that's where the author has so much inner voices and annotations for those that you can't follow. I'm sure
No,
there is one.
no, yes, you are correct. There is one. I actually did find a fan fiction in which the author proceeded to annotate every single freaking paragraph with his own notes on and opinions on that paragraph. And it was by far one of the most annoying fanfics to read. I didn't get past the first chapter. I didn't even get past half of the first chapter.
You don't understand. I mean, here we have sacred Tolkien thinking being called.
Right.
I meant the case where there is so much inner monologue, different perspective and voices that he has a page long.
Yes, no.
Types of different annotations. I haven't.
I have not seen that. No. But the close as it gets to the Korean and Japanese style of move calling and skill calling and etc. is brackets. That's as close as the English variant gets to the Japanese and English and Korean style of light novel skills, abilities, and speaking. Okay, so blah 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 in less than 5 minutes. The goblet of fire will achieve the champions. Blah blah blah. Blah blah blah. People talking. Blah blah blah. Declarations. No way, it's gonna be me, the voice of a 4th-year Gryffindor student who had red hair and hazel eyes. He had an average build and was sitting between 2 other red-headed students, a 4th-year male and a 3rd-year female. He had a scar shaped by a bolt of lightning on his forehead, and his hair was parted so everyone could see it clear as day. This student was Brandon Potter, the boy who lived. The one who made the Dark Lord Voldemort disappear during his first reign of terror. I'm the boy who lived. It has to be me. Brandon, another student said to him. A student with a bushy brown hair and brown eyes. Bushy brown! So bushy she was black, according to J.K. Rowling. Looking very intelligent and pompous. You can't be a champion. You're only a 4th year.
I can be whatever I want. I have plot armor.
To everyone that is curious, Brandon Potter is the wrong boy who lived, aka the miscellaneous Potter relative that took the place of Harry Potter, because for some reason, even though the prophecy states the power who he has not, blah blah blah, born in this time, blah blah blah, Voldemort somehow forgot who was born when and attacked the wrong person.
It's like magical prophecies don't actually work.
And it's almost like prophecies are self-fulfilling piles of shit.
Yep.
Also, to the curious streamer, Fate's Gamble, the fiction we're talking about, is a Harry Potter Fate Stay Night crossover in which Harry Potter accidentally gets teleported to the island Medusa of the Grecian legends talks about, and of the Fate Stay Night version, of course. And so Medusa and her sisters adopt Harry or whatever, and then Harry ends up back in the Harry...
Despite the fact that, you should be immediately dead upon looking at them.
Well, you see, because it's the Fate Stay Night versions, they're all wearing... the Medusa is wearing a blindfold to prevent people from instantly getting killed from it.
Yes, I forgot about that.
Because remember, in Fate Stay Night, every evil character is actually female, and every good character is actually female, and they're all waifus.
I mean, I want to say you're wrong, but I can't.
Exactly.
Okay.
Anyway, point being, Fate's Gamble is TLDR.
We've decided. Oh, and the ones
Alright,
who,
I'll be back.
the
Yeah.
males that actually were still guys, they're all fat pieces of shit.
Well, no, they're not even fat pieces of shit. They're just people that die a lot.
Did you see? Have you seen what they've done to Caesar?
Okay, yes. To be fair,
They literally made him a giant egotistical tub of lard, which
Yes.
is completely inaccurate.
and they also
He
made
was-
Nero. They made Nero.
Nero.
Nero. They made Nero female and apparently Saber.
Oh,
And
let's not talk about what they did with Arthur
Saberface.
Pendragon and Mordred.
Saberface.
Let's not talk about that.
Saberface is a thing. If anyone's aware of Fate Stay Night, they know what Saberface means, and they should cringe in horror. Anyway, so Fate's Gamble, TLDR, Harry gets super strong over the course of 1.1 million words, which is, being that it's around 10 books long, completely acceptable for becoming OP as shit. Anyway, Harry becomes OP as shit, and that's basically the whole story. But with a Fate
I think your push-to-talk stopped working.
What?
I think Atin's push-to-talk stopped working because I'm picking up static.
Oh yeah, we're hearing the tornado that's sucking up your house out. Oh yes, larceny, lechery, and Luna Lovegood. Yes, that is actually a fairly amusing fiction. Anyway, we are so off track. We haven't really even started reading this story, so let's actually get through this first chapter, which actually isn't that long, and then we'll call it a day because we've spent nearly 3 hours on this. I know, time flies when you're drunk and or listening to a drunk man ramble on about how you should write fan fiction. Anyway, blah blah blah. Shut up, Hermione, said the meat puppet known as Ron Weasley, the male sitting next to Brandon said. He's been through way more than that. It's obvious he'll be the champion. He said he sucked Brandon, the wrong boy who lives dick. Hermione sighed and shut her mouth. She refused to suck his dick any longer. Anyways, the goblet was lighting up. The light dimmed, and everything got ominous and silent. As Albus Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts, in case you were mentally retarded, and considered by many the greatest wizard to ever live, advanced towards the Goblet of Fire in a slow and dramatic fashion. The Goblet of Fire was made of wood and had blue-white flames coming out the top of it. Suddenly, the blue flames turned red and parchment shot out the top as if a rocket. Dumbledore caught the parchment as it floated down and read out, "The Durmstrang champion is Victor Crumb." To no one's surprise, there was much applause. A tall, thin, sallow young man with dark hair and eyes. And eyes.
And eyes, yeah, because eyes are
Alright,
extra, dude.
can you describe the suspect? Well, he had dark hair, and he had eyes, and 2 arms. Anyway, he had a large, curved nose, a sharp profile, and thick, black eyebrows.
Curved nose. Large curved nose. What does that remind you of?
It reminds
Sneaky?
me of people who may or may not get me banned from Twitch.
Yeah.
What's gonna get you banned from Twitch? Also, how's that? Is that any better?
It's mildly better.
No. No.
Not really, no.
But not really.
God fucking damn it.
Whatever you had it at before was pretty solid. But just
That's
keep it
the
on.
problem. I haven't changed anything.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate. You should assassinate the people who sold you that headset.
Router.
Yeah, apparently I need to.
There was much applause, blah blah blah, Parchment, Fleur got picked, more applause.
How is that?
Blah,
Is
blah,
that any
blah.
better at all?
Not particularly, no.
Jesus fucking Christ. I don't know what the problem is. Like,
the problem is reasons. And did you ever try that link that I sent you?
yeah, that requires paying Adobe money.
Oh, really? Adobe Audition costs money?
Yes, but why would you pay for it?
I am not
We
legally
are
allowed to
not
say
allowed
that I would
to
ever
advertise
do anything other
piracy
than
on the
pay for it.
stream, even if it is infinitely superior in terms of product gain versus money spent. At no time should you ever consider or perform piracy.
Yep.
Look at me,
don't-
Twitch. I'm being politically correct. Give me money, please.
The problem is, I don't know which song it's
Anyway,
coming from.
blah blah blah. Everyone applauded. I described Fleur. Blah blah blah. She's so pretty. Blah blah blah. Parchment
Okay,
shot
look at
out.
that, look at that.
Brandon Potter got picked. Yes, yes. He was screaming in delight. Yes, yes. I
Did you
told
put
you
your
I would
your
be
name
the
in the
boy
goblet
who
of
lives
fire, Harry
Hogwarts
Potter?
champion. Yes, yes, yes. He said as he ran off into the chamber.
Is he
Everyone
having
was
an
silent
orgasm, or did he
as
just
they
get
all
picked?
stared in shock at the really retarded person. I'm sorry, that's not what it says, but come on. Anyway, nervous laughter and applause, blah blah blah. Albus, what's wrong? Albus, I thought he was dead. Me too, Minerva. With the Goblet of Fire automatically removes the name of people that are dead. And so only people that are alive can be entered into this tournament. It's also never wrong, no matter what anyone has done to it. Oh, McGonagall said. So he's alive then? Yes, Dumbledore said, dropping the parchment to the ground. Setting it on fire with his wand. He is alive. No one noticed it. There was a second name on the parchment that Dumbledore read off of. Harry Potter.
Wait, so now we have both of them?
Yes, on one parchment both names were called.
Well, this is completely idiotic.
Wow, it's almost like it completely breaks the reality that is the canon. Hold on. We all know Saberface. I hate to say it, but I haven't heard that. Isley says Saberface refers to Type Moon, the production company. Type Moon's tendency to draw whatever character is Saber in their Fate universe character arcs as the way they drew the first Saber in Fate Stay Night. So Saberface refers to all the characters looking exactly like a color palette swap of Arturia. That's what Sneaky. What alcohol is it that you are drinking? I am drinking a 80 proof 7-run vodka, which means it's basically paint thinner and or antiseptic, depending on how you wish to use it.
Really not very good for you, and you should probably lay off. You're not going.
Actually, I surprisingly have not been drinking anymore. More or less because I have been unable to straighten the bottle out to the point where it will pour into the cup.
That
Moving on. At the same time...
Did you make...
What?
Is that what happened? Did you make a demon deal?
I did not make a demon deal. Thank you very much. You can go prostrate yourself before your god. At the same time, in Yasaka, to those who are unaware of High School D times D, Yasaka is the name of the nine-tailed demon fox trickster female that is the head of the monster faction of Japan. Mildly controversial opinion, there is no good fanfiction that avoids breaking canon. Well, yeah, any good fanfiction will deviate heavily from canon. And that's only because a well-done fanfiction will have a very small change at the start, which will spiral into accurately written butterfly effects. That's, in the end, what a good fan-fiction is. It's a what-if scenario that is properly written. A lot of people don't do that, though. No. There we go. What confuses you, Vision? And tell me, so I may elucidate you on the workings of this fanfiction and or podcast and or fandom.
Oh, we are already having a lemon on the page.
We already have a what on the who now?
We already have a lemon on this page.
Already?
Oh shit, god damn it. Blah blah blah, country of Japan, blah blah blah, population size. Fucking. That can't be right. Population of Kyoto. Let's try that again. Population of Kyoto. Oh, how about that? It is 1.5. Well, shit. The author actually did research. Also, holy shit, only 1.5?
Say that seems low given the amount of people they normally pack into places.
I guess it's a very small city. Oh, the character, the sex scene, yeah, TLDR, a lot of fanfiction authors are horny bastards who don't know what sex is, don't know what human interaction is, don't know how sex works, and just kind of write what they saw in the porno they just watched, but imagine themselves in the character's place. Because they're dumb, and that's really all you need to say, honestly. Anyway, blah blah blah, warded off the conventional humans, supernatural beings, blah blah blah, population size, blah blah blah, people were having an orgy, blah blah blah.
I'm sorry, what now?
Yeah, it was two beings, a male and a female having sex, describing Yasaka, describing the male. Oh, it's Kuno, sorry. Kuno, who was Kuno? Was that the, no, that's Kuroka. I forget who Kuno is. Anyway, regardless, oh, I'm gonna come inside me too, oh my god, it's so sexy. And then he did, and moaned. Blah blah blah.
Well, hey, at least we can end the night reporting trash.
That is true. Technically speaking, everyone is supposed to report any story or chapter that has sex scenes in it, as fanfiction.net is a mature-only website in terms of how high the rating goes, and anything that has a sex scene that is beyond referring to the fact that there was sex taking place is technically a mature adult and therefore not allowed on fanfiction.net and therefore a breach of the site's rules and therefore reportable.
Let's not do that. I mean,
on principle, and as I have comported myself through all 92 episodes, I do report the fictions that do break the rules. At least when I remember to.
Okay.
Which, to be fair, is not often.
Because you normally don't.
Yes, I guess you need to know the characters in the fanfic. Yeah. An important part about crossovers is writing to the largest demographic. And even then, if you're not writing to the largest demographic, you still kind of need to. If you're going to write a Naruto crossover with, say, Familiar or Zero, you need to describe the Familiar or Zero characters more than you need to describe the Naruto characters. Because if a person is reading, say, Familiar or Zero in this instance crossover, and they don't know about Naruto, it's because they choose not to know about Naruto and therefore won't care for the Naruto crossover. However, if you're reading it because you clicked on Naruto crossovers and it's a Familiar of Zero crossover, they might not know the Familiar of Zero characters and therefore you need to describe the Familiar of Zero characters more than you need to describe the Naruto characters. On top of that, normally most fan fictions, specifically Bleach, Harry Potter, and Naruto, the big three as they're so called on fanfiction.net, and I guess you could say big four now that Ruby's really making a splash, those four really don't need to be described. You really... There's going to be two sections of people when it comes to the big four. There's going to be people who won't read it because those characters are in it, or who are reading it because those characters are in it, and ergo, do not need those characters described to them because they already know. Yeah. It is the difference between fan fiction and fiction. In fiction, you need to describe everything because nothing is known. In fan fiction, there's a majority of things already known, and therefore you need to describe the things that are different. Anyway. Steering right on through on the train wreck to SS Discovery.
SS Discovery?
Blah, blah, blah. I don't know how human interactions work. Blah, blah, blah. I'm describing people. Blah, 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 blah. I don't know how human interactions work. Blah, blah, blah. Sex reference. Blah, 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 blah. Info background. Blah, blah, blah. Suddenly cat girl. Blah, 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 blah. Author's note time. Wow, that took no time at all. It's almost like the first chapter was completely pointless, left us with no reason to continue reading this story, besides seeing an OP Harry Potter march straight on into the Harry Potterverse with no thought put behind it. To declare, look how OP I am! I'm pawning all the people the author hates!
Nicky, Harry lives in Kyoto, has a harem, is quite OP, and is a humanoid lion.
Yes. Indeed. Anyway. Blah, blah, blah. Brandon isn't Harry Potter instead of Harry. No shit. James and Lily live through. I'll explain that at some point in time. Harry lives in Kyoto for some reason, has a harem, and is super OP, and is a humanoid lion person. Also,
Why?
no shit, how he ended up there will be explained at some point in time. Chamber of Secrets never occurred, because who honestly thinks that the lord known as Brandon Potter could take on a 70-foot basilisk? Well, no one, because we don't know who Brandon Potter is besides you, the author, who is meant to describe everything to us, the readers. Edward Cullen, Cedric Diggory, isn't the Hogwarts champion. Harry and Brandon are, because screw Cedric, I dislike him because I'm dumb and don't understand how writing works. Kuroka has been cleared of all her crimes because I don't feel like writing about them. Also, I hate Rias, so all her peerage is going to be bigoted and for some reason stubborn and stupid because I dislike her. On to
Boy,
other
this
things.
author is just a bastion of integrity, aren't they?
Oh, they're bad. Like I said, it's a meat puppet. Harry Potter in this story is a meat puppet. In a majority stories, Harry Potter is a meat puppet who does whatever the author says he does because their hand is shoved so far up their ass, the personality and background to Harry Potter has been shoved right on out and instead has been replaced by insipid filler content that no one really cares about because the author just hand-waved it into existence instead of explaining to us why. Anyway, Harry's harem is older Kunono, his wife and first love ever, Yasaka Kuroka Amaterasu the God, Valayan, i.e. Femme Volley, i.e. one of the main antagonists of High School D times D, Ravel, Rika, Ravel's mother, Shuri, how she's alive will be explained later, female Pendragon,
Someone shoot this guy in the head.
and Lucretia Zola from Campione for some fuck all reason. Holy shit, it's almost like Cledwin wrote this story.
Who?
Cledwin is a minorly known character on one of the Discords I participate in, who's most known for coming up with insipid and completely plot retardant stories in which Harry screws as many women as possible from across as many fandoms as possible for no pointless reason besides Harry put his dick in things.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh man.
Yes, and you were right, Vision. Finding out who is actually in love with Harry Potter would be a majority of the story, because we would all like to sit there and see as Harry evolves from the kid who was abandoned by his family into the powerhouse known as Harry Potter in the D times D-verse, and how he possibly collected so many women to love him. Now, wouldn't that be an interesting story? Too bad the author skipped over entirely the interesting parts so he could get right to the curb stomp.
Wait a second. I am currently reading the author page, his bio, and in his dislikes he's listing the idea of romance. So it's perfectly understandable.
So he dislikes romance, but wants Harry to stick his dick into as many things as physically possible. That sounds about accurate for the average fanfiction author. And this boys, girls, kitties, and attack helicopters of all ages is exactly why I have this podcast going, is exactly why I drink myself to the near death at the end of every single podcast, is exactly why this whole thing is even happening, is because the standards of fanfiction have slipped so low that if you were to go on r/Harry Potter fanfiction and say, hey, the Roar of Kyoto's Wizarding Lion is absolute crap, with no plot, no character development, and absolutely insipid in terms of any sort of interest in the story, you would be insulted and possibly banned from the fandom section, because how dare you say a fanfiction is bad?
Yep.
That is why I have done this podcast. That is why I harp hours upon hours on this sort of thing. Because people don't want to take responsibility. People don't want to listen to criticism.
No, I'm not waiting to post a screenshot in Discord. I just found something on Reddit that
I have actually been personally attacked before because I said fan fiction authors need to hold themselves to a higher standard than legible. I have been attacked for stating such opinions. Yeah.
Because guess what? wanting people to improve is bad.
Yeah, apparently
some reason.
wanting people to be
Because
better
don't
than
you
they currently
understand?
are
Everybody's
is bad.
effort is valid, and they're just trying their hardest, even when it's like.
Zero effort. Yeah.
Anyway, blah blah blah. This will cover the 4th year. If people like this so much, I'll go on to do a sequel. Who knows? Anyway, what did you think of this story? To those who
It
are
was
fans,
trash.
to those who are fans of my other fan fictions, aka The Dragon Who Lived, in which Harry Potter gets the dragon boosting gear, fear not. I have not forgotten about these absolute trash fan fictions with massive plot holes in them. I'm working on the next chapters to both of them, and they're all works in progress. I'll see you to next chapter.
Okay, let's
Hush.
look at the reviews. Let's look at the reviews.
All right, we'll look at the reviews.
No,
and then we shall
don't do that. You will lose
Sneaky.
your
Call it
faith
a
in
day.
humanity.
Sneaky. His other thick.
I would like to
the
point
bigger
out
one.
before. What was that?
His other thick, the bigger one, is at 300,000 in less.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to point out, before we go on to the reviews, that this fiction, The Roar of Kyoto's Wizarding Lion, has 1,400 faves,
Yep.
1,700 follows.
1,700
Yeah.
for this shit. Let's look at the reviews then.
Pointless reviews,
Yeah,
nice addition to the
it's-
harem. Man, I love
it's
these
smart.
harem people. I'm not sure about these harem people. No offense, I don't like in Dumbledore in this fic. Manipulative old bastard stories are a dime a dozen. Good story, more please, more please, more please. Great story, more please, more please, more please.
Okay, I'm on the last page, starting from chapter 1 reviews. It's Bud 99, chapter 1, June 8. Like the start. Hopefully the next chapters are longer. Okay, you like the start. Okay.
Like that start.
Mount
Go ahead. Let me
Mount
continue.
Everest. Mount Everest 21. Well written. I hope to see more soon.
Alright,
Well,
let
my-
me just go kill
I
myself in
told
the
you
arcade.
not to read these. It will destroy your faith if you have any left.
I don't. That's the thing.
Yeah,
me and Steve talk about it all the time.
exactly my point. This is exactly my point. When you go, you see a shit story like this one, for example, and you go into the reviews and you're like, okay, clearly the reviews must be, oh, this gotta be better. I liked your idea, but poor execution, or other intelligent comments like, this wasn't the greatest, but it's had an interesting idea. That's the sort of review you would expect from this sort of story if you were an intelligent, world-understanding individual. Instead, what you get is, oh my god, I'm jacking off so hard to this, more please. That's what you get instead. And it just turns into one giant circle jerk where all the reviewers are telling the author how amazing this story is. And so the author goes, oh my god, I'm doing something right. I'm gonna do it harder. And they don't learn. They don't grow.
Yep.
They don't improve. All they do is more of the same. All they do is worse of the same. And nothing actually happens besides getting a 300,000 word fic of absolute garbage with no interesting plot, no interesting characters, no interesting setting, and the only interesting air quote thing about the whole goddamn thing is the different ways Harry Potter shits all over the canon characters.
Sneaky gets it. My man Kalikarcha knows what's up. He says dank chap. Yep. Yeah, it's a dank meme, this chapter. Banzaiken says it's interesting. Penny is wise, awesome first chapter, and that person put his own picture on a fan fiction community. So, yep. Only long review is left by Holy Knight 5. This would show how. Then triple dots, but the dots are all spaced. Insular are the British, how they are alienated by the rest of the mystic communities. What? What the insular?
Now, I will say, I actually have discovered a Harry Potter D times D crossover that was amazingly done. The TLDR of the story is that Harry Potter is during the what year was it? So the year of Harry Potter, where during the summer all of his friends were giving him the super evasive, we're not telling you anything answers. That year. So during that event, Voldemort's like, oh, let's attack Harry Potter now. And so he does. And in Harry's panic, he accidentally is hit by shrapnel and bleeds on a piece of paper he had picked up from the Department of Mysteries when he was trying to, quote, save Sirius and get the prophecy. And so he bleeds on this piece of paper, and lo and behold, it was the same sort of paper that was being passed out by Rias for contract work in Japan. And somehow it got into the Department of Mysteries, which makes sense because they're there to investigate mysteries. And Harry Potter picked it up when he was in there because reasons. Allowable reasons. Because it's like, okay, you see something interesting, you're like, oh, that's interesting, it's a piece of paper, it should be harmless, you pick it up, you put it in your pocket, you forget about it. Understandable, not suspension of disbelief breaking. He ends up summoning Rias. Rias then saves him from the attack by teleporting him out using devil magic. The author goes into explain how wizards have cut themselves off from the magical world, how basically it's the D times D verse, except wizards have basically insulated themselves to thinking they're the only magical species because, like, 2,000 years ago, they cut themselves off from the magical world because they went enslaving the other magical species, and the other magical species were like, hey, screw you, and so they prevented themselves through various means of being seen by wizards, so over time wizards forgot about them, and wizards were also insular, so that also helped contribute to the fact that wizards thought they were the only magical beings in the world, and etc., etc., etc. The author does an amazing job of combining both universes. The author does an amazing job of explaining Harry Potter's character. The author does an amazing job of explaining the high school D times D verse to Harry's perspective of going through certain events that are now different because Harry is there. Overall, an incredibly well done job in an incredibly underrated genre of crossover.
That actually sounds like a story.
Yeah. Even Oren's seen it. I wouldn't go out of my way to say, oh my god, it's like the second coming of freaking, I don't know, who's a great author? Huckleberry Finn. It's the second Huckleberry Finn. So, I'm not gonna say that, obviously, but
wait, what's about Huck Finn? Greatest American hero ever.
I'm saying it's not the second coming of that sort of book. But it is an excellent, for the section it's in. It's a very well done story. And if you like High School D times D, or even marginally enjoy the setting of High School D times D, and you enjoy Harry Potter, highly recommend it. I'm a bit too inebriated to actually try and find it right now, but it shouldn't be too hard. It's on my favorites page. It's updated itself within the past month or so. So it shouldn't be too far down the list if you search by that. But anyway, this is the part where I give the closing. We have viewed many a story today, and by many a story I mean like 2. And I have ranted actually instead for about an hour and 45 minutes now. I'm sorry, 3 hours, 3 hours and 45 minutes now. I am drunk.
Yep.
And I appreciate everyone coming around for this, whether you are live or you're watching the archive. I don't care. Thank you for sitting here through all this. Thank you for listening to me ramble on and give advice. Yes, there's 12K pages. There's a lot of Naruto fanfiction, and 99.99% of them are absolute garbage. Anyway, my point being, if you like this, we have an archive of every previous podcast. Not all of them are going to be as interesting as this. Some of them are going to be funnier. Some of them are going to be drier. Some of them are going to be more rage-inducing. It's a grape shot. Every single time you come to this podcast, we're never the same as previously.
Also, this is the first time I've been on a podcast.
Yes,
and this is great.
This is the first time we've actually had continuous guest stars. Thank you to both Zeeks and Slingshot for filling the gaps that were left by Atin and Maxforce for a majority of the podcast. I very much appreciate their yesmanship and diversity opinions that they offered.
You're just glad someone was there to tell you you weren't as drunk as you thought you were. Because God knows I tried to get you to slow down.
Now, as always, if you've watched any of my previous podcasts, you should know what I'm about to say. You can catch us at 7 p.m. on Tuesdays and Fridays. We might start a new series on Saturdays, or I might start video game streaming on Saturdays or Sundays, or etc. Join our Discord to get live updates so you don't get surprised by our changes in schedule. But 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. typically on Tuesdays and Fridays is where you can always find us on Fanfiction Theater. And as always, folks, there's always more, and it always gets worse.